Take the stage. Our first panel is the aftermath of COVID-19 and its impact on healthcare. And I think this is going to be a really great panel. I know it is. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. We're excited to kick off this event this morning with this rockstar panel that I have with me here. So we're excited about that. My name is Tushar Gupta. I'm the managing principal of EYP's Houston office. We are an architecture and engineering firm, and we focus on healthcare, higher education, science and technology, and the government sector. In my tenure at the firm, I have spent most of my time in the healthcare space working with great clients like this and many others in this room, and really have enjoyed that journey. And so we're excited to sort of take you through that conversation today. On a personal note, I'm a bass player, and my family's COVID distraction was to convert our den into our attic into a den for my twin boys. Now, they love it, but the punch list is a whole different discussion, and we'll leave it for another time. I'd like to kick it off by introducing my panel here. I'll start with Michael. Michael Garcia serves as the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Houston Methodist Hospital, which he joined in 2013. Michael is a licensed, registered nurse and an attorney with over 20 years of hospital operation leadership experience and has worked his way from the bedside to his current role. Michael obtained his Juris Doctor from John Marshall Law School in Chicago, his nursing degree from Monmouth University in New Jersey. Michael actively engages in major design and construction projects, but most recently, he has had to learn rules of baseball and soccer to coach his 7- and 4-year-olds' respective teams. So that's quite an endeavor, Michael. Welcome. My second panelist, Karen Mooney. Karen is the Associate Vice President of Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction Department at University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. Karen's team manages strategic facility planning as well as implementation of capital projects. Karen graduated from Texas A&M, whoop, and didn't do that too loudly, I hope, with degree in construction management, and received her master's of business administration from University of Texas at Tyler. While at MD Anderson, she was awarded the best boss. And has been a 2-time finalist for Institutional Mentoring Awards. So Karen is a dog lover, and her 4-paw family grew to 3 this past 12 months. So
a lot of poop in my house.
Next, my third panelist is Lance Ferguson. Lance serves as the Vice President of Operations at Memorial Hermann Texas Medical Center. He holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration from Baylor University and a dual Master's in Business and Hospital Administration from University of Houston, Clear Lake. Lance joined Memorial Hermann Health System in 2006 and has been involved in merger and acquisition activities, governance restructuring, and implementation of master facility plan at Memorial Hermann Texas Medical Center. Lance is an outdoor person. He loves gardening and cycling, and so if you see him at the next MS 150, don't be surprised, which, by the way, he has done a few times. So welcome, Lance. My last panelist, Jill Pearsall, serves as the Senior Vice President, Facilities Planning, Development, and Real Estate at Texas Children's Hospital. Jill received her bachelor's in architecture from USC and is a licensed architect in California and the state of Texas. After practicing commercial and institutional architecture, she joined Texas Children's in 2002 and has remained involved in the planning, development, and executing of over 5 million square feet of new construction. However, over the past 18 months, when the social and retail world has taken a hiatus, Jill has spent a lot of time with family and fed her soul with creative and crafty projects. And I hope yours don't have a punch list like mine. So, but anyway, so we're just excited to get it going. So, you know, as we look at this past 18 months and our lives have gone through these ebbs and flows, healthcare has remained on the center stage. We've seen hospitals, respond to these rapid needs with rigor and commitment, saving lives every day, in spite of the challenges that we've had, whether it's on shortage of supplies or in staffing. We've seen deployment of technology. We just learned a little bit about virtual health here. But the term heroes was redefined. And our heroes, our healthcare heroes, stood in the front lines, but also took some punches. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then, of course, this group here was involved in many creative solutions that we came up with in this response, whether it was creating those inventive MASH units, or redefining resilience, or as we think about kind of preparedness beyond the hurricanes that we have to deal with in Houston. So I'm going to invite my panel now to maybe share some of their thoughts, and we're going to kick it off with just hearing a little bit on the impacts of COVID. And I'd like to start with hearing a little bit about how COVID has impacted healthcare, both from a consumer, but also from a care delivery perspective. And Michael, I'd like to begin with you, and Lance, please, after that.
Okay. I'll get started. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this group and for inviting me to share some of my experiences. Admittedly, I'm still a little bit tongue-tied because I'm looking at this room and there's a lot of people without masks, and so we're so used to doing virtual that it's still a little bit intimidating. All that aside, you look back at 20 months ago, COVID changed everything, and it's still hard to grasp how it changed it. So to Shar's question about the care delivery model, which I'll address first, and then the consumer. 20 months ago, when the governor shut down Texas, no surgeries, businesses shut down, the hospitals emptied out. That's one thing we saw. And then all of a sudden you saw the hospitals getting full again, but we didn't know what it was getting full of. When you look at, and I remember this clearly, March 28th, we started seeing the first COVID patient, then the second COVID patient, and the third. And we were panicked then because we didn't have any information. Like all of you, you watch the news one day, there's one piece of information. You watch the news the next day, there's another piece of information. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. At our peak, we had 150 COVID positive patients. About a month ago, the fourth surge, our peak was 868 patients. When you talk about the care delivery model, we figured out how to operate hospitals within the hospitals, but we are also now taking those lessons on how we build future hospitals. I see some members of the Houston Methodist design and construction team here, and a room like this, I will ask them, how do I turn this into a patient unit? How do I turn this into a clinic? Do I need oxygen? So those are the things that we talk about from a structure standpoint. From the healthcare provider standpoint, a quick note, we had to make sure we provided everyone with as much up-to-date information as possible. Healthcare providers are like everyone else. They were scared. People did not want to go into the rooms. People refused to actually care for patients, and that was a tough thing to do. I'll go quickly to the consumer, and I know the consumer standpoint was a little bit different. People were afraid to go to hospitals. People talk about patients dying from COVID. We don't have statistics on how many patients died because they were afraid to go to a hospital. And I know that was one of the biggest challenges we've had. And I'll compare and contrast very briefly March of 2020 to today. In March, April, May of 2020, people were coming out at 8 p.m. People were applauding all the first line responders. A lot of our staff gained a lot of weight because there was so much food donations pouring into every single department every day. And then you look at where we are now, and there's debates about how do you provide health care. That's one of the challenges that we will continue to face as a consumer. So I want to just give those remarks. I'm sure Lance has some additional experiences he wishes to share.
Thank you, Michael. Agree with everything you said completely. From one vantage point, nothing changed, and then from another vantage point, everything has changed since that March 2020 timeframe. One of the things that we've always known, but I think the last year and a half has really underscored, is just the critical importance of having a really strong culture within your institution, and that shared sense of community and vision, and being able to really invest in that has been, I think, a strategic asset that we've all known about, but we really now fundamentally understand even more. Michael hit on it, and I completely agree. The need to be flexible and change a space from one week to the next, to the next, to the next. I never would have guessed that that would really occur, but it did, and it sometimes still is happening, and how we change and reuse and the needs evolve. That ability to be flexible and work with our teams was very important. We are starting to see the impact of delayed care, and so the care that's being provided right now is at a much higher acuity level than what we would have seen 2 years ago at this time. And I think a lot of that we're still going to continue to see because people did not come in for more of the routine items, the things, the maintenance components, the well checks and such, because of fears of coming into a healthcare environment. There's another thing that's starting to emerge, I think, in terms of how it has changed from the hospital environment. And it's something we historically really didn't talk much about, but it's something I think we need to start talking about more. Workplace violence, the impact that our caregivers, direct caregivers, what they're experiencing. There are changes in that environment that we need to understand. A lot more security issues that seem to be popping up. There's tension there. And that is something that I think has caught us by surprise a little bit, that we need to really recognize and figure out how to create some solutions for, and ultimately make sure that we are really supporting and providing the resources for the direct frontline caregivers that are in the trenches every day as we go through this.
Thank you so much. Karen and Jill, what about from your perspective? You know, you live and breathe in the real estate facilities space. What were some of the things that you saw? Karen, why don't we start with you?
So similar, the being able to flip a space, obviously I think everybody had that. One of the other things that we experienced that I wasn't expecting, I guess, was true separation. We were actually going in and separating our researchers from our clinic side. I mean, building walls, putting up card readers, you shall not pass, because it's so risky for our patients, obviously immunocompromised. That, and going forward, we're doing the same thing. Like, you're thinking ahead about how can you drop the walls and have multiple life safety solutions, because we might have to switch something, lock it down, separate.
I probably have a little bit of a different story. So children were not greatly impacted last year, but this year was phenomenal. So the data that these guys were just saying of the number of patients, we didn't see that at all last year. It took the year, and it took the other, what I would say, children viruses, so RSV, that usually hits us in the winter, was massive over the summer. So we had opportunity, I guess, and a lot of time to learn a lot from the adult providers and be able to respond this year. So we remained flexible. What I say, remain Gumby. You just got to go with the flow. Last year, I think we all learned a lot last year, and we were able to respond effectively and timely, but it was a stressor for the staff. I think some of the other things that we learned was what we could take into the future from this, so I always try to find the silver linings to everything. Drive up and drive through testing. Drive up and drive through vaccines. That's here to stay. The convenience for families to not have to get a little itty bitty out of the car to take a test or give a vaccine, and they can just do it in their car seat and drive up and drive off, that's a huge win for families. So we've seen a lot of peripheral, maybe, benefits and changes to our facilities in response to this, and opportunities to go forward.
Thank you. You know, in the sort of the notion of convenience, I guess we saw that technology played a role in that. Of course, we just talked about telemedicine, you know, and that got the headlines. But it seems like as we think about technology, we have to take a little bit of a broader perspective than just, you know, what met the eye there. I think there was a lot of creativity in this time beyond just that, whether it was eyes on patient, whether it was on patient experience, etc. So I guess I'd like to really go into our second topic and maybe sort of hear a little bit more about that from our panel, and really want to hear how you think technology is going to reshape patient care, both in the inpatient environment, but also in the outpatient environment. Lance, why don't we start with you and then Karen?
Absolutely. So from a technology standpoint, yes, I think telemedicine gets a lot of attention, and it is absolutely here to stay, and will continue. The thing that I'm most interested in is how we use data in the everyday provision of care around some of the operational items. And if you think about on the inpatient side, just the challenges of as that patient is kind of navigating through the continuum of care. If we look at other industries, FedEx, UPS, and the technology that they have when a package needs to be routed from point A to point B, and in real time it can course correct and improve and change as new things enter into the equation. How do we think about using those types of technologies in how we can improve how a patient navigates through that continuum of care, because it is complicated and it is challenging, and it's always evolving, and we learn new things as that patient is progressing through there. And so how do we do that? The other piece would be on more of the direct care side, and how do we use informatics to have awareness of issues earlier on so that we can act and respond faster and get ahead of an issue much quicker than we would normally have. And I think those are the two things, from my perspective, that from a technology standpoint, we will definitely be seeing as we move forward.
So similar, it's the prepare for what we don't know yet, right? The room of the future. What is the patient room of the future? What is the clinic room of the future? We don't know. It's going to take us 5 years to build the building, but you want to be cutting edge when you open the door. And so I can't sit in a design meeting in 2021 and try to explain why I need it to look like this, because we don't know what it's going to look like. So that's some of the challenges I think us in the AEC community, I'm just going to put us all together, are trying to figure out what does that look like. It's wonderful when you have a young family and they're all very technology savvy, comfortable, you name it. When you have the 80-year-old from Central Texas that doesn't have a smartphone because China's tracking them, it's like, that's a little different environment. Are they comfortable ordering their meal from their phone, right? Maybe, maybe not. So we've got to be able to make sure we're accommodating all those needs, right? We even laughed when we made some of the swaps for COVID and made some, had to make some COVID floors, et cetera. We had some what we were calling analog patient rooms, and what a miracle that was to have good old-fashioned analog, right? So to me, I think that's also going to be some of our opportunity, is how do you bring some of those patients along? The ones that are going to be there are going to be there. They're going to be asking us, why am I even having to talk to somebody to order my food? What? I don't want to talk to you. Whereas somebody else you're going to have to really bring them along. So I think that's a challenge for us, is how can we meet both where they are?
Thank you. This is such a rich topic. Michael, do you have any thoughts, or Jill?
I'll just add a few comments. I think she hit it right on the head about the users. Do they know how to use it? And then we are currently utilizing residents to teach their attendings how to effectively use technology, because it's much easier to do it that way. That's one. And then hospitals in some respect became mean. We used to actually ask our physicians, our patients, how best do we do these construction projects in a structured manner. When COVID hit, we said, no, we're doing it right now. We're shutting this and we're implementing it. And then we figured out, how do you manage the costs? It was necessary to implement the technology, not only for the care provider, but also for the families. Many of you recall, we didn't have any visitors. All of a sudden, you saw patient satisfaction scores down, patients were irate. They needed to be able to effectively communicate with families. And that's still something that we are trying to figure out how best to do, because The technology that's available today will be obsolete 5, 6 years from now. And that's a best guess. So, Jill?
I think the only other thing I would add is we think of technology as the cool stuff, and cool in my IT world with my IT friends always means dollar signs to me and blows a budget. But we really need to go ask the customers and the consumers, and we did that once, and our Family Advisor Council, our IT team did this fabulous show and whiz bang and whatever, and I'll never forget, one of the family members said, "Can you just text me? Just text me. I just want to know when my kid's out of surgery. I just want to know when the doctor's coming around. That's all I really want to know." So technology is fabulous, data is fabulous, but use it for the business case that you're trying to make, and not necessarily just because it exists.
That's really great, and I think as we think about technology on one aspect, there's this human connection on the other side, and on that sort of side of things, I'd like to pivot to our next topic, which I really would like to sort of go into this kind of a discussion around wellness and mental health. But I'd like to focus that on, as I mentioned, our heroes. So we, there's a lot of data out there. The CDC talks about in their morbidity and mortality weekly reports about 50% or more of those frontline caregivers have had and reported several issues around that. So in this next section, I'd like to explore with you and hear some thoughts on what are some creative things your organizations have taken on to care for the caregivers. And not just now, actually, not just during the pandemic, but also as we look ahead. I think that's going to be, so Jill, why don't we kind of start with you and then Michael next.
Sure. I think through the pandemic, and I would say after we've kind of nailed how contagious it was or wasn't, if you will, just the fatigue of the team, the how do I do my job today versus how did I do it yesterday, all of that fatigue, we really just allowed them space. We created respite spaces where we maybe didn't have them before. We created them out of different spaces that, like consult rooms or something like that, of just clear it out and give them some space to breathe. We also gave them kind of reserved dining spaces away from care areas, away from physicians, away from, everything, a little bit different environment for them. So there was some little tweaks, obviously stipends and the monetary reward side. But the other thing is the nursing team really got creative of trying to use this as a succession planning tool, if you will, and mentoring medical assistants as an example that really want to become nurses, and they really split the baby, if you will, and spread their value to cover all the patients that we had. So they really looked at creative ways to still use the space. We didn't make any more beds out of a conference room or anything, but really spread the value of the staff and relieve the staff by creating a mentorship process per nursing unit. I thought it was brilliant. And I think it will go forward as a new staffing strategy, in perpetuity perhaps, but certainly with this issue that we're having with nurses resigning, and we can't get enough nurses, and everyone is fatigued and just can't do it anymore. So I was very impressed with their creativity, and then obviously we were offering them some other space and opportunities to do something differently to make them just have a moment of relaxation.
And just to add to Jill's comments, we talk about nurses, but the hospitals are full of respiratory therapists, x-ray techs, PCAs, transporters, and all of them are required to work. We started having very candid discussions on burnout and resilience. And that was a hard discussion to have, because then I had to tell people, I'm burned out, I'm tired, and how to seek mental health, which I'll go to in a minute. But the more practical things we developed was comfort rooms for the staff. We bought a lot of zero gravity chairs for our staff. And we have a very good contract with Relax the Back that delivers it because our staff appreciated being mindful of them. We also did a number of rooms where the Center for Performing Arts and Medicine plastered the room with paper and plastic so our staff can take some time and throw paintballs everywhere in that room, and then have a specific music selection, which apparently the most popular is rap. And then the last thing we did, which is counterintuitive for a lot of people, there was quote unquote called comfort rounds. We went there with music therapists, we went there with employee assistance programs, we went there with a chaplain, and we went there with various leaders. The goal was just simply to talk to people and say, how can we help? Employee assistance is not just for you, it's for your family. And I think that was important. We weren't there to solve their problems, we were just there to listen. And we tried not to take the tactic of money. People used to think, oh, we'll give them more money, we'll give them more money. People are turning us down no matter how much money we have because they don't want to work an extra shift. They don't even want to work the regularly scheduled shift. And I think that's one of those challenges. And then one last comment, as you go into future designs of hospitals, we will ask a lot of the healthcare providers, what do you want? When you look at how COVID patients are still taken care of, the hospital designs that worked well back then no longer work. You have IV pumps that have 50 feet of tubing from the bed outside the door, and we're trying to figure out, well, does the plug work? There's no emergency outlet out here. Like, how do you do things like that? Ventilator settings. And then how do you incorporate technology for caregivers as well?
One of the challenges, I think, was that everybody's needs are different, and so we would do a lot of different things, and we learned that we just have to continue doing additional things because we're trying to come up with things that are going to meet the unique needs of all of our different staff members. And yes, lots of respite spaces and quiet spaces. We learned the importance of a therapy dog, and so in our Child Life program, we have 2 therapy dogs, and those guys were absolutely amazing in being able to connect with people who were really experiencing a lot of heavy emotional stress going on in their lives. And then the other one, and Michael mentioned it, and I just really want to underscore the importance of chaplains in a hospital environment. Yes, they are there to take care and minister to our patients, but they were really there for our employees, and they have a pulse of what's going on. And really just want to stress how critical that function is in the work that's taking place in providing care.
Jill, any thoughts?
I just know, ask your clients if they have therapy dogs because they need bathrooms. Design the therapy dog bathroom. Because we have 6 therapy dogs. So.
That's So we have been, as we've sort of talked through this conversation, we've touched about aspects of the built environment, but many folks in this audience sort of live and breathe that sort of the bricks and mortar side of the business. So I guess coming out of this, the last 18 to 20 months, I guess I'd like to really understand or hear from you a little bit about how your organizations and what their approach is going to be about sort of investment in capital construction, for example, as one part of that. The second is you've already mentioned a few things that you've learned through this process, but I think for the benefit of this audience, are there some key sort of takeaways from planning or design standpoint that you think you might be implementing as you sort of think and look ahead? Jill, why don't we start with you and just go through the panel?
Sure. So, again, silver lining. We had 200 and some projects going on before March 23rd is when we stopped doing everything. We put everything on hold. And I think part of the silver lining is we went through ad nauseum every week looking at all 200 and some projects and say, do we really need to do this? Will this be the same? Should we be doing this? Will this be the same at the end of this pandemic, whenever that end comes? So the lesson learned there was we're really looking at capital requests in a whole different way, probably the way we should have been looking at them, of are they mission critical? What issue are they resolving? Is it to support the staff? So just had a meeting this morning of, we really need a bigger pharmacy lounge because the pharmacists are X, Y, and Z. So really looking at the reason for the projects in a much different light and a much more with much more scrutiny. So I think that's great. I think that's where we needed to be, and we really need to ask ourselves those hard questions. Our capital program will probably go up to the same size as it was. We had a little bit of a dip, but I think the demand is there, and our system is so big that we used to do about $110 million of annual capital a year. I assume it will ramp back up to that. So I don't know that the monetary side of it will be affected as much as what are we doing and why are we doing that. From a permanency standpoint, I think we've learned a lot of telemedicine and what benefits there are and what type of space that is needed, which really isn't. So that was a good study to do, that we just didn't feel like it needed to be done in any different space than when than what an in-person visit is done. Definitely the drive-up, drive-through testing, pre-surgical testing. We're doing all sorts of testing in there beyond COVID testing. So I think that is definitely here to stay. And then one thing that we learned right now is once you get through a pandemic and realize what treatment you have to have for that pandemic, you need that space for it much more than you needed before. So our infusion space needs to about triple to be able to treat and provide the treatments for the pandemic. So having more outpatient flexible space, we have inpatient flexible space, but outpatient in this post-pandemic treatment for the virus is a big lesson learned that we're taking forward.
Thank you. Lance?
So just in terms of kind of the evolution of needs and space and how we approach construction, I think regardless of how virtual things evolve into the future, we still need space for people to come together and connect in the same area. And so we saw that during COVID, and big spaces, we would use them for vaccine clinics or whatever. So we still need that. And I think we need to be cautious about letting that go. We're going to need that open space. Second thing is just the flexibility of space, and we've all, I think, kind of hit on that, but the needs evolve and change, and the things that you're thinking of now, there's going to be something down the road that we never thought of that we're going to need to be able to use that space for. And so I think trying to be as intentional as possible with the space and the needs evolve, and can we design it in a way that can function in a different capacity if called upon at some point in the future. And then just one of my things is just we need to build things that are as durable as possible because in a healthcare setting, they really do get put to the test. And that one to me is just personal in how we approach things. But so design for open space and for people to connect, design for flexibility, and let's make it as durable as possible.
So in our world, kind of to the same experience Jill had, is we were, it's kind of like when you're on that moving sidewalk at the airport and then you hit the end and you know it's coming, but it's like you still trip. I don't know why. But so that's what it was for us, right? We're plugging along. We've got all the jobs, and it was like, shut everything down. So, okay, we can do that. And then how do you kind of ramp things back up? How do you do those assessments? So what we're finding interesting is that now that, you know how when you go the little riding sidewalk, you trip, and then you walk about 10 feet, and then you get on another one, right? So we're on that second one, except the second one is going a lot faster than the one we got off. I'm not really sure how that happened, but so now it's go, go, go. Because we want flexibility, we need you to go faster, we need you to go faster. We need it to be flexible. We need to be able to, flip, convert, you name it. All I hear when they say that, when the clinicians and leaders say that, is cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. That's all I hear. Because now I'm thinking, okay, so now you want me to design to make it both positive and negative? You want me to design for 12-hour changes or 6 or, whatever. So it all sounds good. I don't know that we can afford it. That's the part that I'm still very cautious about. It's very difficult to tell the executive in the room going, yeah, you can't afford that. But I'm telling my boss on the side, we can't afford that. So we'll see as this goes forward really where the temperament is of where that balance is. I'm a firm believer, we cannot build that entire building to be as flexible as everybody wants it to be. We can take a wing, we can do that, but I don't know that we've settled in a culture in our organization, really where is that landing? We know the storm is coming, but like, when do you put up the plywood? Like really, right? Do we wait? So anyway, that's what I'm struggling with, so.
So I think I would actually compliment your answer in that I'm thinking 10 years from now. I'm not talking about building more universal rooms per se. I don't want negative pressure and positive pressure in the same room, because 10 years from now, instead of talking about a pandemic, you're talking about diseases that are endemic to our society. So we have to figure out how to provide care. The challenge I have in providing care is that how do I provide workable space? And as much time as we spend thinking about it, there's no social distancing in the operating room. There's no social distancing in an ICU. So throw that out the window and stop trying to create a design that works now because we're all still scarred from what we just experienced, and think about 10 years from now. But 10 years from now, what I'm thinking about is hospitals will still exist. We will still need med-surg, universal ICU, acute care, and IMU. What we are trying to figure out is two things. One, how to build the clinical space appropriately for the people that are in the hospital, being mindful of their entire well-being, and then how to create flexible space for non-clinical staff that are all working from home that I'm incredibly jealous of. Because when you're looking at it, that's one of those things that we built an admin building, then COVID hit. Our admin building is empty. We turned it into a vaccination clinic, and we're going, that's a great use of an admin building. So I think those are the challenges that we have. And when you're talking about budget, I'm mindful of supply chain issues. So when you're budgeting for all the projects that all of you are doing, I'm going, what's the turnover? How long do I need to do it? How much do you need right now? And what do I need in 2025? Because if you tell me you need $100 million right now to start this project, I'm more apt to do that than versus giving you $100 million in 2023, because it's going to take 3 more years. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking about these things that I never thought about.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting how we take some of the sort of inertia, but then I think, as Karen, you said, there's going to be a tempering that'll start to occur. So we're almost coming to the end of our time this morning, but I thought that what would be really great for this audience if maybe we could just go around the panel again and talk about what are the 3 things that are keeping you up at night that you can share with this audience. And furthermore, what is the real sort of call to action for this audience as we sort of think about moving forward in this very COVID environment? Karen, why don't we start with you, Lance, Jill, and then Michael?
So here were my 3 notes that I came up with this morning, like 10 minutes ago. No, so growth on steroids, that keeps me up at night, right, completely. The cost of flexibility, which we talked about a little bit. And then from a more personal perspective, it's like, am I supporting my team? So I can't be in every meeting, I can't be in every, right? So you just can't. So if I have a choice to make, my choice is always, am I empowering, am I coaching, am I supporting the team? Because if I have the team that they feel comfortable with, they know what to do, right? So when in doubt, they don't need me helping make a decision, they mean me supporting them. So that's your call to action. Check on your team, make sure they're good.
Karen kind of must have stolen my notes maybe before, but the thing that keeps me up at night really it's being able to continue to attract staff into a very challenging emotionally stressful environment. And I think staffing is the thing that is keeping healthcare leaders up right now. And that will probably be the case for the next probably 2 years. Yes, that's the one thing. The takeaway that I would ask of you would be, if you know of a critical care nurse, a respiratory therapist or something, just show them the appreciation, that an acknowledgement of what they've been through over the last year and a half. It really has been tough for the people at the front line of providing care during this pandemic. And I think, for them to understand how appreciative that society is of what they've been able to do over the last year or so would just go a long way.
Yeah, so my 3 worries are workforce, and it's not only our workforce, but your workforce. Mm-hmm. You're the ones that make it happen for us. And so being flexible and strategic around the workforce, and when you trigger projects, when you trigger design decisions, whatever, I worry about the future of that. Supply chain, really worry about supply chain. And again, having a strategy, working as a team to deliver on that strategy is key. And your knowledge base of the supply chain in the design and construction world will help your owners tremendously. Keep it on top of your mind, keep it on top of their mind. And lastly, culture. I think everyone's company culture has changed, probably not for the best. And so my call to action for all of us would be, do what you need to do to get that culture back, to get the goodness of culture back, and to keep it and sustain it, because this won't be the last pandemic. Yeah. I'm totally with Michael. 10 years from now, we're going to have something else. Learn from this experience and bring that culture back to you and to your teams, and to your owners as well.
I want to just say ditto, but when I look at it, Jill and Lance are right. How do you attract a very competent workforce? I'll add one more thing. How do you retain your workforce? When you see the great resignation, and there's many articles, people are just quitting. So how do you retain it? I think that goes to what both of them talked about at some point during this discussion. How do you maintain and keep your culture and improve upon it? Apart from those things, the things that keep me up at night is people should come to a hospital, get checked. Hospitals are safe. I would rather have you get checked now and prevent something later that could have been completely avoided. So please go encourage friends, family, please go see a doctor, please go get checked. And the last thing that keeps me up, especially in a hybrid working environment, is social media. Social media is here to stay with us, but how do you combat against misinformation? And that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, at least within our environment.
Thank you so much. I think that was a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I guess I'd just like to conclude by saying that, we find ourselves in this unique point of disruption, and I think the challenge to all of us is going to be how we use this as an opportunity to reimagine the future. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. If our second panel could come to the stage.
We've probably got one of the more riveting panels today, talking about technology. Kim called me last week and said, hey, can you moderate this panel on technology? Thank the Lord that I'm moderating and not speaking to it, because I am not the world's best technologist in the world. We have lots of wonderful people at McCarthy that take care of our BIM and BDC and technology, but Tashar, your iPad, I'm going to show you up with my piece of paper with some notes. So this is my technology. So anyway, hopefully y'all enjoy it. I am Preston Hodges, operations leader for McCarthy Building Companies in South Central Texas. And unlike Tashar that had his iPad, I'm going to ask everyone to actually introduce themselves here. So Rebecca, will you get us started?
Yes. Is this working? Push the button. There we go. I'm Rebecca Davis with Leo Daly. We are a architecture engineering firm we have multiple disciplines and sectors that we serve, but we've been working in healthcare for over 70 years. We have 7 offices across the country and 1 in Abu Dhabi. I am the market sector leader for the South region, Texas and its surrounding areas, and also the lead medical planner in our Dallas office.
So I'm Brendan Buckley, and I'm the Senior Director for Healthcare Technology for North America for Johnson Controls. Does anybody here not know Johnson Controls? Okay, if not, we had a video for you like about 20 seconds ago, so we can rewind it and play it again. But anyways, obviously we're a large multi-industrial corporation that does everything from HVAC, security, fire, all the way into clinical technology. So we're pretty broad in our capabilities and definitely in our reach. So appreciate the opportunity.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarma Valamuri. I wore the hat because I was told to wear the hat by marketing, so here I am with my hat. And I'm the CEO founder of Luminaire. I'm a recovering physician. Most of my work in the hospital used to be in heart, lung, liver transplant, and my job was to keep people alive long enough for them to get their heart or lung or liver and make sure the doctors didn't kill the patient. And about 10 years ago, my friend's daughter ended up in my ICU, died of septic shock, which is the body's response to infection. I realized that we needed better software at bedside, so went home, mortgaged the house, started a company in the garage, and I'm looking at Santiago because he's known me for a while. And today we're an emerging technology company. We stop people dying of infections. We have a very large public health vaccine and COVID testing system, and we have a hospital-based sepsis prevention platform that uses software.
Well, good morning. My name is Santiago Mendoza Jr. I'm Senior Vice President at Medistar Corporation and also Integrated Viral Protection Services Filter. And so what we do is we actually are in the business of improving indoor air quality, also making sure that the safest and cleanest indoor air spaces are here around. We're already in many schools. We are in hospitals, businesses, government across the world. And we actually are the filter that you see. The reason why, with the green light, the reason why you're also able to not have to wear a mask indoors. You're actually in the cleanest and safest indoor air space in Houston right now. And we're very proud of that. And the reason for that is that our filtration system actually kills viruses. We're the only filter, biodefense indoor air filter that actually kills viruses and not just catches them. So, feel safe, breathe easy with IVP here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introductions. Kick it off. First question, what are some of the new and emerging technologies that will impact hospital facilities going forward? I think that every one of you probably has some input on this, so why don't we start with Santiago? I think you just hit on a little bit of y'all's technology, but anything else you want to hit on?
Absolutely. So our Manzur Horani, who's the president and CEO for Medistar Corporation, as probably everybody in this room knows, he's actually the inventor of the integrated viral protection. Aside from several other inventions under his belt, he actually took this invention to the University of Houston, up here to the superconductivity lab, the National Galveston Lab, and they came back and they said, Mr. Horani, this actually kills 99% of viruses instantly in the first pass. We are now currently endorsed, the only filter endorsed by the Texas Hospital Association, by the Texas Restaurant Association, and also by the Texas Education Agency to help and protect and reopen America.
Awesome. Sarma, would you like to add on?
Sure. If you don't understand anything I say in my tropical accent, just raise your hand, I'll say it again in the same way. So the reason I wear the hat also, apart from it being a joke, is the healthcare technology industry is in kind of its very, very early years. The analogy I like to use is it's like when we built the railroad out west, and the large software corporations, all they're doing is they're digitizing the environment. They're just building the rails out west. And our hospitals are looking to them and saying, you guys are going to build us the cities and the salons and the churches and the places of worship and all the other things that we want. But all they do is they have an engine that like runs in a straight line. So that's, kind of the information storage layer that we have in hospitals today. Like the world's largest medical center where we're sitting today, I was around when we implemented medical records. That was less than 10 years ago. And we got computers at bedside in patient rooms less than 10 years ago. So the industry is where the airline industry used to be in the 60s and 70s. So this is like a technology gold rush right now in healthcare. So I'm going to stop with that and just say that, we're in the very early days of tech innovation in healthcare. I know there's a lot of news on, all the fancy devices. I don't mean this device is from, 100 years in the future, but I mean all the devices that we're putting inside people. If you think about it, we're still cutting people open, stopping their heart, and then sewing them back up together to like fix their problem, right? So that's kind of barbaric and old school. So there's a lot of innovation that's coming down the pike. So that's just a teaser for what my next answer will be.
Yeah, and just to kind of build on that, I think that what we kind of forget is we actually have one of the largest stores of data, right? Hospitals have, 200 plus systems, between the clinical and the, operational technology, the facility systems, obviously, the business systems as well. It's a lot of data. I mean, it's up to a normal hospital can generate up to 50 petabytes of data. And does anybody know what a petabyte is? It's not a creepy one, for the record. It's actually, think about 1,000 terabytes, a little over 1,000 terabytes. So it's a lot of data. The craziest part about that is, on average, we're only using 3 to 5% of that data. So it is the wild, wild west, and it's there's a lot of opportunity out there to leverage that data, but it's we're definitely at the infancy of that.
So I come with a little different approach because we're looking at how do we design facilities to accommodate all this really cool technology. We are working with the VA on some of their modernization for their electronic health medical records. It's been around forever. Everybody knows it. We've reduced medical errors by scanning your patient, scanning your meds, and there's a number of ways that all gets incorporated. The VA, they are not building a single telecom room that is smaller than 170 square feet right now. That's a big room. That is a long way away from when we used to make them like 7 by 8. So planning for what you don't know, planning for that flexibility, and those emerging technologies we've started seeing like drones are delivering PPE, they're delivering meds, but University of Maryland has used a drone to transport a kidney 2.5 miles for a kidney transplant. That's not emerging, that's already happened. So there's some forward-looking thinking there on what are my health systems used for drones? Where am I storing them? Who's maintaining them? Like that takes up space, and it needs to be thought about and kind of planned for.
Awesome, fantastic. Kind of pivoting to the other side of the fence, what weak spots has the pandemic exposed when it comes to technology's impact on the actual end user experience? Rebecca, do you want to take that first one?
Sure. Telehealth. We've seen telehealth, how amazing it is, how it's been integrated. One of the things, though, especially for behavioral health telehealth, is a lack of continuity of care, and the last panel touched on that a little bit. People are using apps that don't tie back to their primary care physician or their electronic health medical records, so they're just going online, they're meeting with whatever doctor, whatever therapist, and they're not getting that continuity of care. We're also seeing with telehealth, some patients still need to be seen in person. We haven't lost that person-to-person touch, and we can't replace the value of in-person care. We've also, COVID, I think, really exposed digital health illiteracy and digital inequity. So the people who already had access to Wi-Fi, to a phone, who already knew to use that, they adapted really quickly. People who didn't know how to use it didn't have access to it, and so there needs to be a growth and a learning and an education program for health systems to kind of bring up, if we're going to digitalize everything, bring up that team or that inequity that we have, and create analog rooms, like Karen mentioned, of just some people want to talk to a person, which is great, and I don't think we should lose that.
Yeah, I would probably take it from a different angle on just the space. I think really when you look at, let's be honest, we used to have the acuity adaptable. We still have that. That's a big deal. How many hospitals have acuity adaptable spaces? Quite a few. How many have really figured out how to leverage that space and really make it truly acuity adaptable from a staffing, from a supplies perspective, all of that? It's not easy. And I think that the COVID experience that we've all kind of gone through from a facilities perspective, and how do we take rooms and have them convert into being COVID safe rooms, going negative air pressure. How do we manage that? And then from a protocol perspective, and manage all the other staffing, other supply aspects around that. We've figured it out. I mean, we had to, right? This is from our client perspective, seen some really good creative out-of-the-box thinking that really honestly saved the day. But it really exposed the fact that we have all these spaces that we think are flexible. They are to some extent, but we really haven't looked at it holistically, everything from the actual facility systems to how are you going to staff that and support that actual environment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to deviate from the answer that I said I was going to say because of what he said. So, when the pandemic hit, we were in a showcase with the CDC talking about how do you prevent infections and people from dying in the hospital. And the showcase got canceled because everyone was told to stay home. The CDC looks at us and says, you guys should think about doing what you did in the hospital for infections in the outpatient space. So I like to play dumb. So I asked, really, why? And they said, well, think about it. One of the largest infections known to mankind is like sweeping across the planet. Don't you think you can make things better on the outpatient side? So I said, what do you mean? And we kept asking them questions, and we realized that our healthcare systems don't talk to each other. Like, we knew this, but we didn't know how bad the situation was. And if you cast your mind back to March last year, everyone wanted a PCR test. Everyone wanted to go get tested for COVID. And, a large city nearby here with a population of about 6 million people, we had about, I'm not going to take names, we had about 400 tests a day. And I remember sitting in the room with both the city's leadership and the hospital leadership, and they're all going, we have 500 tests, we need 10,000 a day. And so what we ended up doing was designing a system that allows people in the community to basically figure out their probability of having COVID. Because if your probability of having COVID is really high, you don't really need a test. Because if the test came back negative, it's most likely that you have COVID and the test is wrong. And if your probability is really low, you should just stay home and isolate. So there's a window of people that need testing. And then when tests started coming online, there were 10, 15,000 people a day that needed a PCR test. So our conventional model of park your car, wear your mask, go sit in line, get swabbed, didn't work. And that broke. And so we ended up developing what is today known as the drive-through testing model that is so prevalent across the country. So that was designed about 100 meters away from here in a TMC office where it was piloted and launched here first in Houston. And then we said, hey, the vaccine is coming out, and our brick and mortar way of delivering care, that's going to work great for people who already have access to healthcare, who have a primary care doctor. What about everybody else? So that's when FEMA stepped in, DOD stepped in, and the answer turned out, who has the largest empty parking lot? And I spent about maybe drove about 5,000 miles in a period of 3 months, just going to the largest parking lots in the state. And we were helping FEMA and DOD set up mega vaccine centers. So Dallas, the city of Dallas, anyone here from Dallas? Okay. All right, go Texans. So, sorry. So the city of Dallas today has the largest single center for vaccination. They've done over 500,000 doses at a single site at Fair Park. And it was a parking lot. And that exposed to us that our model of delivering care today as primary care centers, where you have these large buildings that you're going in and staffing, these teledoc companies are coming and eating us alive. When I say us, because I'm on the side of the hospital system. So these telemedicine companies are coming in and basically capturing patients and pushing them away from the brick and mortar model. So now the task for the industry is figuring out how do we decentralize care and how do we sort of have clinics in communities where people live, because that's going to be key to delivering care. And it's not my problem to solve, it's the problem for the people sitting here to solve. So with that, I'll shut up, hand the baton to Santiago.
No, thank you, Sarma. So in my personal opinion, when I'm out there talking to clients, potential clients, the weakest and the worst thing is the misinformation. Misinformation, what I mean by that is what the folks in the facilities, the administrators know in regards to indoor air quality, in regards to the scientific data that is put out or these filters are run through. A lot of folks are very surprised when I talk to them about our particular IVP system, is that we actually tested our system, our filters, with the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus from patient zero, from the patient from ground zero. And so and it was the first time in the history at the Galveston National Lab that so much COVID was tested. They actually pushed it 270-fold. Not just that, but they also pushed anthrax spores in 4.5-fold. And we're talking about billions of spores. And they came back and they said the same thing. So everyone's surprised when we tell them that other filters that are out there, that are in the market, they're being tested by microphage, by bacteriophage, MS2, so synthetic viruses. That's what they're being tested on. They're not being tested on the actual virus. And then also the other thing that they're also very surprised, which surprises me too as well, is that when they find out that the best HEPA filter, MER filter that are in hospitals and in restaurants and hotels and all that catches 0.30 microns in size. COVID is said to be about 0.02 microns in size. And it takes them back to tell them, I said, keeping your same HVAC and filters you're using is like having a mosquito going through a chain link fence. It really is. It does nothing to it because the bacteria, the viruses are way too small. And not only that, they only catch. They don't kill. They catch. We actually catch and kill, and that's by far the biggest thing for us is the misinformation as to what they already know and what they don't know.
Great, thank you. I'm going to combine two questions, I think, because I think they go along the same lines. But first question, how can technology enhance the patient experience going forward? Maybe some new technology ideas. And then similarly to that, how can technology play a role on how we plan and design healthcare facilities? Because I think as we plan, design, and construct healthcare facilities going forward, I think the patient experience obviously is one of those top issues that we need to consider. So Rebecca, you want to take that?
Yeah, of course. And that's a huge question, right? There's so much that can be done, and you have so many options, and how far do you go? How smart do you want your patient room to be? Hey, Alexa, put on this playlist. Hey, Alexa, close my patient room blinds. Put on an informational video about diabetes. Tell me about the procedure I'm having tomorrow. Like, you can take that a really long way. But if you have the infrastructure built in, you don't have to make that decision now. Other things, like we do have a staffing shortage, so are we going to start looking at AGVs to move equipment from logistics or from pharmacy or lab up to the patient units or between floors? that's something you want to kind of know in advance because those corridors need to be a little wider. You probably want to look at 10 feet. There's some things that need to be built into the infrastructure to accommodate those AGVs. So there's some stuff that you want to think about to incorporate now, and some things that can be day $2. There's also things that are enhancing patient experience. It's not just in the patient rooms. We're already doing 3D printing, right, of hearing aids for dentistry. We're looking at orthotics. My son is 20 years old. He's in college, and he is in the 3D tissue printing club. 15 years ago, that was like, wouldn't it be cool if someday we could print tissue? He's in a club at school that does it. So those are things that are coming that are fascinating. Wearables and what do you do with that data? That's going to be enhancing patient care. But we also need, it's not just what's happening in the patient room. The last panel touched on the staffing. There are more women graduating from medical school right now than men. We are losing caregivers, staff, nurses, physicians, and everybody more so now than ever wants a work-life balance. So, and men just as much as women, when they go into work, they may want a space where they can sit down. Nurses, physicians, they want a space where they can sit down and FaceTime with their kid at home and read them a bedtime story or chat with them for 5 minutes before they go to school in the morning. So it's not just accommodating your patients, it's accommodating your staff and bringing in those things that bring in your staff and retain your staff because they feel they can achieve that work-life balance.
Good answer. She stole 2 of my answers. And for the record, I was in the astronomy club. We didn't do anything cool like printing tissue, which is amazing. But I think kind of building on, the smart patient room, that's continuing to evolve. The voice piece, absolutely. But I think we're on the cusp of really kind of getting back to an earlier comment around, the actual, all the data. How do we better leverage that? So you have, patients that are in these rooms for different reasons. Maybe they need different environments. So what if, this is not, so if all the IT folks that are about ready to throw HIPAA objects at me and PHI, this isn't sharing the actual patient data, but what if it knew that the occupant in this room had a specific condition that might require different air, different lighting. Maybe they just got some bad news, bad diagnosis, or maybe they're getting ready to go into therapy, right? So, so there's a lot of things that we can take, data that we can take, and to change environments, and really kind of make, patient rooms almost sentient, right? So they actually respond to the actual environment of the patient really needs. So one way to think about it is imagine if you had art, digital art in that room. And why would we ever want digital art? You could change it to provide motivation or to provide loved ones pictures, something that makes the patient feel that, hey, you're not alone and you got this. So I think that's really where we're kind of heading, and there's a lot of, again, it's leveraging data that, quite frankly, is from a hospital perspective, spent an awful lot of money collecting. Let's use it a little bit better.
Okay, that was a great answer. I don't know. Maybe I should be sitting in the audience instead. Before I answer the question, a quick show of hands. So we're going to talk about enhancing patient experience. If you believe that the patient surviving the hospital stay to discharge, so if the patient lives and comes out of the hospital alive, that's a good patient experience as opposed to them dying in the hospital. If you believe this, can you raise your hand? Okay, all right, everyone believes this. Okay, so what we found is the number one cause of death in a hospital is sepsis. It's an infection, right, or the response to infection. What we found is, to his point, the amount of data that exists in the health record that a patient is already sick and is about to die is staggering. It's just the ability to look at this data is really hard, right? Because it's siloed, it's hidden. Think about your computer. You have all these Excel spreadsheets. Someone asks you for something. What do? You start going looking for it. So imagine for every minute that you waited, the patient's mortality is going up. So with sepsis, for every hour you wait, mortality goes up 10%. So the more time you spend looking for information, while you're looking, that person is dying. And this is true for stroke, it's true for heart disease, it's true for infections in the hospital, just to mention a few. Okay, so we said, I have a great idea. The health system has all the information we need that the patient's getting sick. Let's build an artificial intelligence tool that looks at this data and then generates an alarm if the patient is getting sick. It was a wonderful idea. I worked on the early alarms, and then what happened is the alarm went off all the time, and the nurses hated it, so everyone ignored the alarm. And then I didn't tell the nurse I had anything to do with that, so that I could still kind of work in the hospital and not get things thrown at me. And so then we realized, okay, so just having information storage does not work. Adding an intelligence layer, that's great, but that does not work very well either. So then you need a layer on top of that. If you look at it as a pyramid, the peak of the pyramid is actually driving provider engagement. So if you're able to get your nurse or your doctor or your nurse practitioner, the providers, to do what they do today in 6 hours, in about 15 minutes, they're happier, the patient survives because time is key, the golden window of care is key. And so with respect to technology, like, we see an increasing move towards like provider engagement and patient engagement. How do you actually take the information, make it meaningful to change behavior? So all tech needs to be pointed in that direction. Especially, I'm a millennial, I don't look like it, but I am. I'm sorry. So, driving engagement is what all these technology companies are doing right now to get millennials to basically short circuit their dopamine cycle in their brain. So that's one answer. The second answer is, hopefully none of you will ever be a patient or have a loved one as a patient in a hospital, but if you happen to be there just for fun, hang out at the nursing unit, pretend to drink coffee or water or whatever, and just stop there for a second and stay there for half an hour. Look at the number of times someone walks up to a computer, logs in, and the number of times they have to click before they actually do any meaningful work, right? And if you're going from place to place to place as a provider, think of the amount of time that's spent. Then see if you can shadow a provider into a physician's room, or into a patient room, and you'll see the same thing. They'll stand there, they'll click, 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 click. They pull up a X-ray or a CT scan on a screen that's 10 feet away from a patient that's about this big, and then you're pointing at it and saying, do you see this CT scan? Yeah. You see that dot? Yeah, that's your cancer. And it's not a great experience for the patient. And the future looks like the provider walks into the room identifies who the provider is because of something, either a chip that's in their arm because they got a vaccine, I'm joking. That's a joke.
There he is.
Fighting words. Or it's because they have a badge or something, right, that identifies who this person is, their cell phone, dual-factor authentication, facial recognition, whatever you want to call it. They walk into the room, they know who this person is, they know their subspecialty, they know what orders this person put in. The system knows, we call this a deep scribe. The system knows what is the most relevant information this physician is going to share with the patient. It pops up on a wall. That's right, there's no screen. The wall just basically pulls up the echo image and says, hey, let me review with you your CT scan. There's a CT scan thing, boom. Why? Well, because that's what deep scribe natural language processing is doing for us and will do in the future. And then as they point at it, it's taking notes, breaking the complex terminology that doctors like to use into words that actually mean something in English, and converts that into something that the patient can then look at later and be like, I get it, I got it. And the facility, so the way you build the building is the thing that is going to, drive the hospital of the future. I think Santiago once asked me what my next company was going to be, and the next company is going to be a hospital. So the dream is I'm going to buy a hospital building and basically just sort of from the ground up design it for it to be efficient. And I think like a lot of people in this room have the ability to do that. I don't have the expertise to do it. It's just a dream for me. So, happy to chat about this for more time in the future if you need me to.
We can also build it for you.
Perfect.
So, wow. So emerging technologies, of course, that affect hospitals in the future and stuff like that. of course, I'm going to talk about integrated viral protection, IVP. There was an article about 6-7 months ago by MIT, and what MIT said in this article, and it's online, they said whether you're 6 feet away from each other, which is what we were being told to be, or you're 60 feet away from each other, both ways you're under the same risk of contracting SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID virus, which is what they were talking about. And the reason why is that we've now found out that viruses like SARS-CoV-2 is very, very small, again, 0.02 microns in size. And so what happens, that means that it stays in the air longer and it travels further, farther away as well. So how that is being traveled, and there's also other studies, and I'd be happy to also send out all these links and information. But what we found out also as well is that HVACs are super spreaders. They're considered super spreaders when it comes to this. The panel before us talked about facilities, hospitals, what they're doing to provide those safe spaces and all that. Well, you can build bigger spaces and put people further apart from each other, but these viruses are so small that they're still going to travel. They're still going to stay in the air for long. So what you need, and we actually do that as well, we actually retrofit HVAC systems. When you drove in, I'm pretty sure everybody saw the cranes that are up here, catty corner from where this hospital is. Well, those, we are actually developing those sites for the NMed, Texas A&M NMed Engineering Medical School. And the tower that's going to be completed by summer of 22 is the student housing tower. That student housing tower is going to have from ground up integrated viral protection in the HVAC system. So that's going to be the safest indoor airspace. Again, we're talking about today what we're dealing with is pandemics. But what about the future? Buildings like that, buildings that do that retrofit and use this type of technology, not only are they prepared for now, but they're going to be prepared for others. And what does that mean? You won't have to shut down completely. We cannot afford to shut down again. We've talked to the insurance industries. They've told us the same thing. We cannot afford to shut down again. And so this is type of the emerging technology. Again, we can build bigger buildings, but again, the indoor air, the circulation, we still have to deal with that.
Fantastic. This one's not on the script, but I think Santiago may have talked a little bit about AI. Somebody talked a little bit about robots, but I'll tell you what, I don't know what it was, probably a year and a half or two ago, Nolan, when I walked into Methodist and saw the first robot that I'd seen rolling down the hallway there. And so, you know, there's probably some other facilities now in Houston with the robots that are strolling through the hallways for a number of reasons. But maybe is anyone on the panel, can you speak to the robotics or AI of where it's going? Maybe either Brendan or Sarma?
So, yeah, absolutely. And actually, I might even throw in a story that might incriminate me regarding one of the robots, and it really doesn't sound good. But obviously, the automated guided vehicles have been around for a while. Probably the first projects we started doing with that was over in Asia, believe it or not. And these are, you know, delivering medications, linens, meals, and they're kind of going to preset points. Important lessons from a design perspective, kind of what Rebecca was saying, is larger hallways, yes. Run those back of house, yes. Have a dedicated elevator bank for it, yes. And please put like Wi-Fi in the carrier of that elevator. All those things to keep the connectivity, make those things work. Absolutely critical, but now we're kind of getting into the autonomous motorized robots. These are the ones that they can go and deliver things right to a nurse's station. So these are medications. So we're starting to look at, you know, actually how do we deliver medications directly to the room and how do we track that? So it's no longer good enough from an asset tracking just to know where something is. Kind of need to know where it was and also where it's supposed to be. And then if there's any delays in that delivery. So we're seeing a lot more intelligence being built into the autonomous motorized robots. We're seeing a whole bunch of additional capabilities there that are starting to get pretty excited. And I'll be honest, I think probably 60 to 70% of the projects that we're working on now are including those, you know, on the new construction. And we're now also, which is much harder, going in and also doing some retrofit of those types of technologies in the hospitals today.
I did not know we were automating construction. That's pretty cool, or some parts of it. So I want to paint a mental picture for you. There's actually a thing that is a software robot. Like, believe it or not, it's software, but behaves like a robot in the digital space. And so here's how you think about it. So this is the coolest thing right now in healthcare technology. It's called robotic process management. And the reason I think it's the coolest thing is because that's what we do as a company, is we do robotic process management, and we kind of came up with that word as well. So you're a pilot and you have a plane. You're about to take off. Hopefully you have a clipboard with a checklist on it that you're going through, making sure that everything's okay on your plane before it takes off. Because you missed one thing on that checklist and you miss a check engine light. I'm not a pilot, but you miss a light or something going off, that plane's going down and everyone on that plane dies. So today in the hospital, we have 800 people a day who die of sepsis, preventably, in the US. That's 2 planes fall out of the sky every day, and everyone on those planes dies because we missed the checklist. It's as simple as that, right? Okay, so here's the software robot. Imagine the software read the checklist, read the computer, looked at the patient, put all this information together, populated the checklist for the human, and said, look, you have 5 minutes to fix problem number A, you have 6 hours to fix problem number B. This plane should not take off. That plane will get fixed, and people on that will not die. So robotic process automation on the software side, all it does is it takes repetitive behaviors that our nurses and clinicians do and uses software to do that with high fidelity, faster than people, so that they can actually do their jobs, which is not clicking in the computer, but actually taking care of the patient. So that's the latest sort of what's coming down the pike, is robotic process management for nurses and doctors. And also on the robot, actual physical, when you think robot, what's a robot? There's a cool company in Houston, shout out to them. They're a Swedish company called ABB Robotics. They have a healthcare field here, a healthcare division here. They sit like maybe 30 feet away from me. These guys are building basically lab automation systems. So what they're doing is, when you build that special sort of pathway for a robot to deliver care, deliver a lab sample or whatever it is from the bedside to the lab. Today you have a highly skilled worker who's cutting open a Ziploc bag, taking out a vial, scanning the vial with a laser barcode, looking for a place on the centrifuge, putting that in, going back, repeating it over and over again. As opposed to this person's actually supposed to be calibrating the machines and actually making sure that the stuff works. They're being used for menial labor. So the robot basically takes over and produces lab automation. So that's something that's happening actually in Houston. And if any of you are interested, happy to introduce you to those guys. Very fascinating. Worst case scenario, you have a great time-lapse video selfie with yourself and a robot.
So what someone just described there is absolutely key to that. How do we leverage the other 95% of the data that's out there? So, I mean, glad you brought that up. It's huge. And I just wanted to add that, because I did forget to cover this. Do not get on top and try to surf any automated guided vehicles. It is not a good thing, and they take your picture, and they sound an alarm. So I did that in a hospital in Canada when they first came out, just to kind of, before it opened, like, well, what, this thing's whipping around. What happens if we just jump on it? Don't do it.
Give you a safety violation too. Rebecca, do you have anything?
I just want to add one small story, especially for facilities who are looking at how do we expand, but we are landlocked, we can't expand, our department within our departments are landlocked. Mercy Hospital in Fort Smith has incorporated AI in their ED, and it is predicting bottlenecks. It is triaging patients based on protocol and based on symptoms, and it is predicting capacity shortages, and they're alerting that ahead of time, and they are assigning patients to rooms based on what conditions they have, and they have reduced their wait time. They have increased kind of your critical patients that need to be seen first. And so they're getting care faster. And that was not a renovation. That was just incorporating AI into what they already have built. So sometimes you don't need different space. You just need a better use of your space.
Awesome. Santiago, do you have any closing thoughts? I see y'all's machines, they're on wheels. I would think you could probably automate that. I don't know that
Yes.
they need to roll down the hallway, but.
No, absolutely. So the Intercontinental Hotel was one of the first hotels in the country, actually in the world, to deploy these filters. When word started getting out, when folks started finding out, especially here in the Texas Medical Center and international folks that come in here, immediately they gravitated to us because they knew with the scientific data that we have, how it was created, that they could come in here and feel safe and feel confident and feel comfortable. Part of the, little bit to add to the AI, one of the things that we're doing is that we're also talking to some very large companies about future things with IVP, where they'll be able to report what the indoor air quality is. So can you imagine going on Yelp and saying, oh, this restaurant's kid-friendly, oh, wait a minute, it's 100% clear of viruses. That's where I'm going. I'm not going to go somewhere else. So we do that all the time by going to 4 or 5 stars instead of a 1 star. So those are the kind of things that are coming also with AI. But thank you.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to our panel. And we look forward to chatting with you later today.
Thank you so much for our second panel.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to kick off our Future of Healthcare Facilities panel. I'd like to start with introductions. Steve, if you'd please kick us off.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Schultz. I'm managing partner at Follow Wilkie Partnership. We're a healthcare firm here in Houston, and we just celebrated our 35th anniversary. So.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Preston Cope with McCarthy Building Companies. We're a national general contractor. I'm a project director responsible for our healthcare work here in Houston, and I've been in the industry for 15 years, all of which with McCarthy, so no, I am not still in high school.
Good morning. My name is Marissa Vasquez. I am with Houston Methodist Hospital. I'm a director of facilities and construction projects, and I have the pleasure to support our hospital in our South region, which includes Sugar Land, Clear Lake, and Baytown.
Hello, this is Anita McClellan, Executive Director of Kimball International. Yes, Preston, you do look like you're in high school, but at least you can touch the ground in this chair. I lead design and innovation for a furniture manufacturing company that specializes in health, and my role is really to honestly disrupt, listen, and try to solve problems for today that lead to better outcomes for the future of health.
And I'm Anthony Stanley. I'm Director of Healthcare at Core Office Interiors, a bold innovator of FF&T. So I'd like to start our questions here. Marisa and Steve, I think you all have a response to this. What changes in healthcare facilities are you considering post-COVID pandemic? This pandemic has put more focus on surge capacity. How do we quickly convert large areas to handle a surge of infectious patients? Marisa, if you'd start us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear my name. So good morning. So, just like the first panel mentioned, we had a lot of projects going on right as the pandemic hit. We did continue some of them, and then we just put some on hold and then reconsidered and replanned what we were doing. Some of the strategies that we're doing, which some of you guys in the room know because we've been working with you all, include being able to have more rooms be negative to the hallway. And I know Jan is looking at me, I'm going to say this right, with a flip of a switch. And that does not mean they're isolation rooms, but they just prevent the air from traveling from the rooms to the hallways. One other thing that we've been looking at is also not necessarily universal rooms, because we are in community hospitals, and in the various sites that I've worked in, the whole conversion, the use of the universal room seems to not be as great in the community, and so we're looking at something different, which actually entails utilizing flexible head walls that we're able to, or where we're able to add gases or outlets or IT connections very easily without having to take the room down for more than a day or two. And then the last thing that we're doing is we're still growing and growing a lot in our community hospitals, because with either the work from home and or just not wanting to get on the highway for 45 minutes to get to the hospital to see your provider, we're seeing a great demand in our community hospitals for specialized care close to home.
Yeah, and I follow up on that. Our firm has done quite a bit of work in developing these comprehensive centers, out in the community to not only be more convenient for the patients that these hospitals serve, but provide just better access for health care. These comprehensive centers are really set up to provide most everything that you would need in a healthcare setting, everything from emergency services to primary subspecialty care, comprehensive imaging from MRI to CT, all the way down to ultrasound. So they even have sports medicine, pharmacies, and labs. We've helped our clients develop these in strategic locations around town, so that's really helped. And not only does it help from a pandemic surge standpoint, the only hospitals, the main large hospitals in the systems can really only handle so much surge. And so by having these additional outlets, you're able to kind of distribute that surge out into the community a little bit better. So
I want to respond to what Steve and Marissa said, because I think one of the things we found through all of this, and as the other panelists said, is that we don't know where the future of health is, but I challenge us to say it's not uncertain, it's truly shapeable, and we have an opportunity to shape it in a certain way. And I think Karen in the first piece said, one of the things that keeps her up is that not everything can be flexible, because the flexibility comes with a rapid cost. And sometimes I'll pick on myself, that I forget about the cost implications because I want to solve the problem at hand. But I do believe that the word flexible is a phrase of the past. And I challenge it to say, let's not be flexible, instead let's be responsive. And being responsive is a whole new paradigm of how we solve space and place with the surge capacity and the footprint.
Thank you, Anita. That's wonderful feedback. What healthcare real estate trends do you see in 2021, and how does that compare to 2020 and prior years? What are you seeing for the future, 22 and beyond, Marissa and Anita?
So, like I mentioned earlier, we did have a lot of projects being planned that got put on hold. But what that actually allowed us to do was not to be always in a rush. That always seems to be, we're planning in all these packages, we're trying to break ground without having a full, complete packages. And unavoidably, that turns into additional costs. From when we go to foundation and site, to when we go to core and shell, to when we go to interiors, something didn't quite get coordinated early enough, and so we end up spending additional money. So instead of going in the pull the trigger right away mode, we took our time, and we have really developed the designs fully, or are planning to develop a lot of our designs fully before we start breaking ground. And we do expect that, hopefully, that will provide some return in the future as far as not having to spend that extra capital and being able to allocate the money where it's going to be more beneficial to the hospital.
So I think that it's a hard question to answer because what I felt like I personally learned through this entire experience is everything that we design for, right? We talk about, workplace trends. Let's, go to large footprints, right? Remember the day of 10 by 10 cubes, and we went to 7 by 7, then we went to benching, and let's squeeze as many people and densify space. Everybody remember that, right? Let's squeeze it in to, oh my God, now we have a pandemic, and now we need to go back to the 6 or 7 foot and 8 foot. And the aha moment for me was this model was broken. It's been broken. And we continue to solve problems for what is happening right now instead of addressing what space and place means and that footprint. So obviously the evolution of space right now, and for those that are in corporate real estate, I'm sure you know the sweating of, hey, we got buildings not filled with people, or I'm bringing half the people back. What I will say that we're seeing, health, workplace, higher ed, doesn't matter, is that people want choice. And we never gave them choice in the past. People want to say, I have this work style, or I'm coming here to do this in this health environment, and they want the ability to be able to choose how they want to work, how they want to collaborate, and whether they want to even be in that office. So it wasn't about density, and I think we always solve about density instead of how people want to work, the ability to have options, and redefine what that footprint is instead of constantly solving the same problem day in and day out. I can't say that it's growing. I know one of the questions is going to be about inpatient and where do we see this square footage, but I think the difference is we didn't really give individuals that opportunity. And when we talk about caregiver burnout, are we really talking about just respite space, or are we really talking about giving people the opportunity to work the way they want to work?
Thank you. Preston and Steve, will telehealth play a bigger role in the primary care part of healthcare, eliminating or reducing the primary care setting?
Yeah, sure. So telehealth is definitely a hot topic. I know the panelists before have talked about it, and we're even talking about it here right now. And I think what we've seen definitely on our projects is a plan to implement telehealth. So that could look like additional AV systems or better lighting and acoustics. And, you know, when we're looking at our projects, one of the things that we continue to see is the increased technology costs, kind of like the panel said before. And so what we're trying to do is budget the project early on and making sure that we have the right costs allocated, what the owner's picking up, what we're picking up. But specifically for AV, the technology that's out today is going to be obsolete in a couple years. And so it's trying to plan for the future. What is the right budget? You know, it used to be 32-inch monitors where, oh, that was the standard deal. Now we're at 43-inch monitors. And so it's trying to continue to look forward to make sure that the budgets are good now. But we haven't seen it on the projects, you know, eliminating primary care. It's more of just a hybrid, a supplement, you know. Just like our kids at school started online learning where 4 years ago nobody in K through 12 hardly was doing that, but now teachers are more comfortable with it, students are more comfortable. We're hearing the same thing as being a part of the project team, hearing from physicians and clinicians that they're comfortable with it. They just want to provide the best experience possible and the best care, which means they have to have the best technology to do so.
As was said in an earlier panel, you know, I don't think that telehealth will ever replace primary care. There's always going to be a need to see the patient, and you know what we're seeing is, you know, the kind of the next iteration in telehealth, you know, from wearable technology to, you know, we're already designing you know, specialized hubs for hospitalists to monitor ICU patients, you know, via video and telehealth means and technology there. So, you know, I could easily see the kind of the next iteration being, you know, more of a centralized or even a decentralized, you know, virtual provider hub that provides primary care without seeing a patient. You would have doctors going to a facility, whether it's an MOB, a freestanding building, and actually treating patients, you know, virtually. And if they need to see a primary care physician in person, then that could be scheduled. So I think there's a lot of things moving, a lot of dynamics there. And another area that I think that probably it's most needed is out in the rural areas where there's a limited amount of health care, and developing the technology for that to serve that need is important as well. So.
Great, thank you. Marisa, I'd like your thoughts on the strategic changes that you're seeing regarding the flexibility of acute care spaces.
Yeah, so definitely technology is a big thing. The question is, where are we putting that technology? Do we put it in the room? Do we put it outside the room? Do we have options? Do we have pandemic mode and regular mode patient healthcare. And so, around that same flexibility is what kind of redundancies do we need to have? I think most healthcare facilities will have, obviously, generators. Power's always been a big one. But one thing that we learned over the past year, not necessarily because of the pandemic, but because of the freeze, was what happens to our water systems. We don't have redundancy in water. It just was never a thing that came up. And so we're looking at exploring at options to have those systems available, because healthcare is not one of those industries that can stop, right? We have to keep being there to provide services for our patients, whether it's pandemic related, whether it's your heart, whether it's cancer services. We have to be able to still be providing those services and provide health to folks that are coming to see us, and they're coming to see us because they're sick, not because they just want to come see us. So how do we keep providing those services in spite of whatever curveball is thrown our way?
I'm going to ask Marissa a question, even though I'm not the moderator. So, hearing some of the comments yesterday, sorry, Anthony, and the challenges of cost versus flexibility, what challenges do you face in addressing that?
So, I want to say we are very good stewards of our money on our projects. We don't always go the low-cost solution. We don't always go the high-end solution. I think we try to look at the cost-benefit of each initiative and each alternative. We always try to be at the forefront of innovation, whether, again, it be on our construction projects or whether it be on services to our patients. So, we look and we do our research, and I think we're grateful to have upper management that supports those decisions. And so, not that money's not an object, because it's always an object, and there's always challenges, but I think that we are able to be very creative also with the help of all our designers and engineers, and to be able to provide the most cost-effective, flexible solution, although it seems like those two things shouldn't be on the same sentence. But, again, very creative team, very supportive management, and so I think we are able to reach a really good compromise that will allow us to address the needs of today, but have the flexibility for those unknowns that will be coming in the future.
And this next one is for all of our panel. Before COVID, there was a focus on reducing footprints and having smaller healthcare facilities to deal with urgent and daily patient visits. Do you see that changing, and a greater look at adding ICU beds and expanding healthcare facilities? Anita, do you have
Another really hard question. So predictive analytics about the future. So I believe actually the footprint, again, my perspective only, that the footprint that we have today was all about, right, there's a cost square footage of a extremely complex building structure, and we economized and we tried to tighten up, and I'm talking inpatient specifically, these environments. And I struggle sometimes talking about, post-pandemic and all this stuff. I think it's more about how and where the future of health is going, and we look back in time to inform it and also give it a new voice. So that's what I think. So I think that the current footprint model is antiquated. But I don't think we need to go up to 375 or 425 square feet. I think we can be extremely thoughtful, understand the costs and some of the redundancies in there, but I do believe it needs to increase. It needs to be responsive, as I said before, to be able to adapt and flex and accommodate, because I never personally ever want to see ever again in my lifetime, and I'm old, in my lifetime, people in New York City waiting blocks and blocks because there isn't, or in Texas, blocks and blocks because we did not ever prepare for an emergency preparedness issue. So I also have a fundamental belief. We set ourselves in emergency preparedness for a one-day event. God forbid it ever happen again, like a 9/11. Well, a 9/11 was a one-day event. And we got really good and rigorous about how to solve for a one-day event. We did not understand how our infrastructure really, frankly, somewhat sucked in some ways. I take ownership of that too. And now we have something to inform us that a one-day event isn't the only kind of emergency management issue that we can have. So my answer is I think things are going to get bigger, but they're going to be very prescriptive on being responsive.
Steve, can we have your feedback on that question, please?
Well, as I look at this question, I think about, trying to, create some opportunities for out-of-the-box thinking. For example, we're kind of working with some clients to take retail centers and develop, hospitals out of a big box store. Just to continue trying to provide that service out more into the community. So, I mean, that's the kind of thinking, the adaptive reuse kind of mindset, trying to create, different types of healthcare models that, aren't traditional. Another one of our big developments over the last 4 or 5 years is the micro hospital. This is kind of, I don't know how many of you know what a micro hospital is, but it's a licensed hospital, but it's not a community hospital. It's probably 15 to 40 to 60,000 square feet. It's an emergency focus, but it's located out in the suburbs. It's branded by larger hospital systems so that they can extend their reach out into the community as well. Provides most every service that a larger hospital would provide, but much closer to home. And so we've probably designed 50 of these around the country, and they really fill a niche within the healthcare delivery model. So.
And I would like to add that I don't know about the rest of the folks here in the room, but when I heard in the last panel 10-foot hallways, my heart skipped a beat. I was like, oh my God, no. So bigger, I'll say, I think we're being forced to a certain extent to go bigger because of all that new technology and also the new codes that, eventually will get adopted here in Texas at some point, right? That we keep trying to figure out what that's going to be. Bigger is not always better. Although it seems that way, right? But we are trying to be very conscious about what that growth needs to be, and very much on point on what that extra square footage is going to get used for. Going back to budget and schedule, obviously bigger means more money, means longer durations. And our needs are now. So how do we accommodate those needs now, with all these other items out there that are hanging over our head, and to accommodate for flexibility and for the next pandemic, God forbid, and for, additional healthcare with higher technology and potentially higher acuity.
And just to add to what Marissa's saying is, you mentioned before about convenience, and I mean, that's this whole idea of, community hospitals serving where people want convenience. And it's not always just like you're saying about being bigger, but the community hospitals and the level of acuity and the types of treatments they can provide it's amazing the type of services that our community hospitals can provide in lieu of going, downtown here at the Med Center. And so really making sure that as part of the team, we are looking at the demographics and what those services are, so that's right size, right fit, like you just said, not always bigger, but just what is that service line that needs to be out in the community to serve the community the best.
Marisa, sorry to keep putting the spotlight on you, but this next one's for you. What changes do you see in the ambulatory healthcare flexible or agile MOBs?
So one of the projects that actually we continued working on throughout the pandemic that never stopped was one of our medical office buildings that we were building over at Clear Lake. And we have been very successful with our model for orthopedic services, being in ambulatory services. That was one of the drivers for that particular building. We're about to break ground in Sugar Land on another medical office building as well. The first potential tenant for this building is actually our spine center because it needs to grow. We don't have any space where they're currently located. So we're working on developing that footprint. I see that because our hospitals are constrained, we may have a lot more of those departments that are part of the hospital but are mostly outpatient starting to move outside of the hospital. The challenge with that comes with supply chain, comes with support services from lab and pharmacy, and increasing those distances to deliver the goods without having to replicate a whole department or support department into the medical office buildings. I think the hospital buildings themselves are going to become more inpatient-centric, and then also we are seeing a lot of not just in our campuses growing medical office buildings, and I think Preston touched in this a little bit ago, but we started our model where we had our emergency care centers be more located in our neighborhoods, and that continues to be a good model for us. We're starting to add more primary care, again, close to home, because you're doing your thing, or even if you're a stay-at-home mom, or if you're working, or you don't want to have to drive or take a whole day off to go see your doctor. You wanted that convenience of driving 15 minutes to the front of your subdivision, going to see your doctor, coming back home or to work, and then go on about your day while still taking care of yourself. So I think it's a little bit of a hybrid model, if you will. So both hospital growth, again, concentrating in those services that have to be inpatient, and then outside of the hospital footprint growth for more of those services that can be ambulatory or outpatient.
Steve, this one's for you. Regarding the Texas Department of State Health Services guidelines shift to the Facility Guidelines Institute standards, new regulations, what long-term impacts will they have on your particular field?
Does everybody know facilities guidelines? I'm sure most everybody knows what it is. We've been working with it for quite a few years now, not so much in Texas, but in other states. And it's a really good guideline. It has the opportunity to react a little bit quicker than what we've seen with the Texas Health Department state rules, and it has a renewal every 4 years, so that's really important as the changing dynamics of healthcare change. We have a guideline now that will allow us to kind of keep up with current trends in healthcare, so that's a positive. There are a few differences between the guidelines and the current state rules. Some of them save space, some of them add space. And for example, we have the prep and recovery or recovery areas for the state of Texas is a little bit different ratio to OR than it is. It's actually less for FGI. Some procedure rooms, endoscopy procedure rooms, can be smaller. That doesn't necessarily make or is a reason to do that. I mean, they may want to be bigger for functional reasons, but there are some subtle differences. FGI does have larger clearances around the beds, so that can have an impact on the footprint for a patient bed floor. So that has cost and budget implications as well. So, but I think overall it's going to be a really good thing for Texas. I know Texas adopts it next year. I'm sure it will have some amendments to the FGI that we'll need to keep track of and understand what's different about the two documents, and also FGI is updating next year as well. So 2022, there will be a lot of changes in that regard, and we'll just need to keep up with it. But I think in the end, it's going to be good. So.
And just to add to what Steve's saying, so as a contractor, we're continuing to look through the lens of budget and schedule. So what is the FGI guidelines? What does that have, impact on our budget or potentially the schedule? And I mean, some of the things that we've heard teams talk about is like Steve, the bay spacing for the structural bays. Well, what is the right, the perfect column grid spacing that for a bed tower, that works best for the room that the room needs. And then another one or an item that we've been working through is the STC requirements, so the sound transmission requirements through walls. You know, FGI has a lot more prescriptive or descriptive breakdown of room-to-room transmission, and so, you know, what used to be pretty standard partition schedule for the stud size we're going to use based on, you know, what was going in the wall, but the deck-to-deck height has gotten more complex because we're really trying to make sure that we align with FGI on that thickness of that stud, the drywall, how that all works together to make sure we meet those new guidelines. So.
And how to make it cheaper, right?
That's right.
Thank you. Anita, I'd like to hear how you research the findings on this one, on what workforce and staff retention issues you foresee in the future, and then I'd like to hear from the rest of the panel on how that might affect you as well.
You know, I don't even think I need to really answer that. I think the other two groups kind of answered it. I mean, the fight for talent is real. I know one of the things, the issues with commodities is real. So everything seems harder. Everything seems more stressed. I know the first group talked about this post-pandemic environment, about recruitment and retention, and it's hard. So my answer to this is exactly, I think Michael said it in his first, you know, get up every day and thank somebody for doing the right thing and saying, thanks for being here today. We really appreciate what you have to do. Number two, create, and I believe this is part of where my DNA falls in, which is to create an environment that's conducive that they want to be there, or give them the opportunity, like I said, by choice, right? You know, that they have choices in their work day and work week to do this, to be able to support the type of work that they need to be doing and how to do it. But you gotta almost create a playbook that is about where the future of what the next generation of people are going to look like. I mean, the reality is that we said that the boomers were the largest generation. Well, that's going to be come and gone here really fast. We have, for the first time in history, a multi-generational workforce, and the multi-generations don't work the same way, don't think the same way, and look at choice very differently, you know? So we have to start addressing that now, and I think that might be potentially a hypothesis for a research project that, again, when I talk about solving problems, right, is that we're solving problems for today, but we're not looking at what the workforce of the future in a multi-generational landscape is around choice.
So I have a couple of things that I know are very important to us at the hospital, and I imagine in every other institution as well, that affect our staffing. One of them is that very, you know, I think it got mentioned before, but you know, that very much work-life balance, right? I think during the pandemic that got extremely stressed, with many of us having our kids at home while we're trying to attend meetings and do, you know, get a break in there to be able to make lunch, and then as soon as the kids got, I don't know about you, but as soon as the kids got back to school, you know, you could breathe a sigh of relief. But then now you have that guilt factor, I'm not spending enough time with my kids, right? So how do I stay present at work and do 100% of my job correctly in time, you know, and still be able to have that time to participate with my family? I think that's very important to all of our workers, and especially, you know, I think our current generation, the upcoming generation, it's not so much about I'm coming home, I'm working, I'm bringing the bread home, and that's it, that's all I have to do. We want to be present. So how do we accommodate our workforce to be able to feel fulfilled in that instance? I think the second challenge that we have, which is an opportunity and a challenge, is technology. We're always connected, right? We have one of these, and then we have an iPad, and then we have the computer, and so everything is ringing. You're in a meeting, and the phone is buzzing, and then, you know, you're getting the emails that just don't stop coming, which I'm kind of glad all of you all are here, because my email has been very quiet this morning. And so, you know, I think that's a challenge and an opportunity, because at some point you have to disconnect. Otherwise, just the stress levels are going to be through the roof, and that eventually is going to start affecting what you're doing and how you're delivering that service and that care. And then I also think that we as design professionals and construction professionals, we have a unique opportunity because what we do really either makes the healthcare providers work easier or harder. So I think that we're starting to see more engagement from the individual user groups as far as what their wants or needs are. And then how do we design our buildings and our structures to be able to support those needs? We don't, obviously, there's a million things going on. There's 27 computers in the room and all the alarms that, they talked about earlier today that are beeping. And so how do we integrate all that to make it more functional for the folks, for the end user that's, taking care of the patients?
I want to add something, Marissa. So we know that 76.7% of respondents say space and place matters. I mean, that's a large grouping of people. So when we talk about recruitment and retention, when we talk about nurse caregiver burnout, those are real things. But we often say, well, we've always planned it this way, or we've always done it this way. We should strike that from the language because doing something the same way doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So, it's real. We want people to take care of us. But are we really providing care stations, care environments that are conducive for the people who work in that environment? Because they, at the end of the day, have the hardest job to do.
I guess just from a little different perspective, as a contractor, can't pass a question up about workforce, but the labor shortages in the construction industry are a real thing. There's statistics that say 60% of construction workers that were employed in 2008 are no longer working in construction. And then you have, a great push by, in academics and in high school to push kids to go to college as opposed to joining the trades, which is great. But ultimately, it's left the trades down on employment. And so we are continually trying to solve the labor shortage problem, and we're doing it with a few ways, but it does come down to quality of life and liking your work. What's the work culture on the job site? What's the work culture for the company? And we've also, another demographic point is construction typically has been very few women. There's the industry has not employed many women, and when you look around, there's about 50% of the workforce that we're not tapping into. And so one of the things that we've also done is work with the local AGC and other places to create a partnership for women and open up the opportunities for other folks that historically construction hasn't engaged in, to show them that there really are good jobs for everyone, to participate in.
I think what really resonated with me earlier is when Jill said culture and how do you maintain culture, in your office and in your family. That basically it's your family, and so in this hybrid working environment that we've been in, it's been a challenge to do that, and we continue to try new things to kind of bring that back to where it was, and I guess the one on another hand, when you're working in this hybrid environment that we've been in, this work environment, it's, how do you maintain training of your staff and mentoring properly, especially the younger staff who, during the whole pandemic, we hired 5 people who never even saw the office. And so we had to figure out, okay, how are we gonna teach them? How are we going to train them and mentor them? So there have definitely been some challenges, and we're hoping for next year that some of this will settle down and we'll be able to get a little bit back to a more sense of normal in this new normal that we have. So.
Yeah, I want to thank our panel for the conversation this morning. I hope everybody learned some insight on facilities for healthcare. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Round of applause for our panel.
Good morning, Houston. I'm tempted to break out in the song. I think I'm a Californian, and I always think of the stars at night. Right? Isn't that how it goes? All right, so I am Monique Salas, the North American Business Development Manager at Sage Glass. I have to give the obligatory commercial, so I'll make it short and sweet. Sage glass, if you're not familiar, is an external glazing solution. So if you can imagine glass, I mean, I feel like I work for the Jetsons, right? So it's glass that knows what you need when you need it. So it mitigates against heat and glare. Super popular in healthcare because it removes your need for blinds and curtains. So it mitigates against dust and mites. Dispels some myths, right? It is affordable. Emory's used it, Kaiser's used it, NIH, just to name a few, Cleveland Clinic. But enough about that. Today we're going to be talking about streamlining the process. We had a great, is there feedback here or is it just me?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, I wonder if I can get some help with that. I'll keep going, but I think it's kind of weird. So we had a great prep session on Friday. We actually had to cut it short, so I'm excited to jump in here and have this conversation. And with no further ado, I'm just going to pass it over, and you can introduce yourself, Noel.
All right. Good morning. I'm Noel Cardenas. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of Memorial Hermann Southeast and Pearland Hospitals. I've been in my current role now just for over a year, and prior to moving into that role, I was the Chief Operating Officer at the Memorial Hermann Northeast Hospital for 5 years. Prior to joining Memorial Hermann, I spent almost 28 years in the military, in the Army, as a Medical Service Corps officer, trained as a hospital administrator. So what I learned in the military side, I was able to transition into the civilian sector. During that time, I did a variety of different assignments. Several of them were in hospitals, in executive level roles. I culminated my career as a Chief Executive Officer of the hospital at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and then prior to that, I was the Chief Operating Officer at Brooke Army Medical Center. So over the course of my career, I've had a lot of opportunities with construction and projects. Some of those, and even in the civilian sector, when I joined the Northeast campus, one of the things that we did up at Northeast was we had built a replacement tower that was much needed and headed that project there. And then one of the major projects I had during the military was due to base realignment. We integrated or combined 2 Level 1 trauma centers in San Antonio, which was at Lackland Air Force Base and Brooke Army Medical Center, and that included the building of a 750,000 square foot tower and administrative building. So I had oversight of that project. So a lot of fun during that time. And for my fellow veterans out there, happy Veterans Day.
Good morning. I'm Phil Chisholm. I am Director of Medical Planning at Page Architects here in Houston. I have, out of school, my first project was a cath lab, and so I have been in licensed acute work for well over 30 years in healthcare, and I've done very little ever since. I did have about 6 months doing chicken processing plants, so I'm trying to figure out where that fits into things. But I really focus in on labor cost of hospitals, how to bring commonality from one campus to another campus, very focused on just the broad range of acute care. I've done a lot of greenfield campuses, probably more than a dozen and a half, 2 dozen greenfield campuses of various sorts, from micro hospitals to medium-sized hospitals, international hospitals, 1,700 bed hospitals before as the lead medical planner. So I enjoy the ever-changing technology of facilities and really trying to stitch together institutional opinion from one campus and one system to the other. It's always exciting and a little nerve-wracking to see how client A and campus B and another system, how they see things differently. You can get, for example, 5 different CEOs in the room, and they'll have 5 different answers to the same question. And how do you reconcile that? And that's some of the excitement of what I have to deal with every day.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Gaurav Khadse. A lot of familiar faces here, so
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all after 20 months of staying in isolation and looking at you on two-dimensional surfaces. So good to see you all in 3D. You can all call me GK. I know my name is a little difficult to pronounce. I'm Assistant Vice President in Texas Children's over their facilities planning and development team. I am what you call a recovering architect. I moved from our architectural profession to the dark side, which is to the owner's side. Worked for several years in the industry. A lot of my friends are here. And then just found it really interesting to be on the owner's side. So worked for about 8.5 years at University of Texas Medical Branch over their facilities portfolio, looking at their real estate and about 10 million square feet of facilities spaces, specifically front-end planning, strategic planning, master planning. And I'm a recent transplant to Texas Children's Hospital, and I'm really enjoying it here over the facilities planning and development team. There is a lot that I like about the nexus of pure architectural services and the business side of architecture, and I think there is a lot of value that architects can bring on the owner's side, knowing architecture as well as the business aspects of why we do what we do. So that's my interest, and glad to be on this panel.
Well, Noel, I want to also thank all the veterans as well. On Veterans Day, my brother was career military as well, so thank you, and thank all for your service that have dedicated most of their years to serving and protecting our country. GK, you said the dark side. I thought contracting was the dark side. No, Corey Burkhalter, O'Donnell Schneider Construction. I'm fortunate to serve as our Vice President and Principal of our Healthcare and Research Division. I've been there about 7.5 years. I've got 27 plus years of general contracting experience. Fortunate and blessed that almost all of it has been in the greater Houston area, and almost all of it's been in the healthcare industry. The Texas Medical Center has obviously grown, as we all know. I see a lot of familiar faces as well, and I'm going to say blessed because I never wanted to travel in my career, and I've had to travel very, very little because of the abundance of work in the Texas Medical Center in the greater Houston area. We specialize in what I would consider the mid-size, invasive, active campus, extremely challenging healthcare projects. They generally don't get all the glory and the awards that a lot of my friendly competitors out there get, but that's what we do, that's what we know, and that's what we love. And I've been fortunate and blessed once again to be able to work with some of the same systems, many of the systems, for decades. And that's through trust, that's through relationships, and that's through doing the right thing. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's going to be a great conversation. We've got a nice mix of owner and partners. Noel, let's start with you. When planning any type of healthcare facility, what do you think is the most important factor to take into consideration?
Well, when you look at the most important factor, obviously the key is to identify the key stakeholders when you're going to be, obviously looking at the type of facility. Obviously before that, you obviously want to look at, obviously the demographics, the type of facility that you're going to want to build, and the purpose behind it. And then with, as I mentioned, the stakeholders, and when you look at, let's just use an example of a hospital, and with my example, a new inpatient tower, you want to make sure you identify, the key stakeholders that are going to be part of working in that area. When you look at, and obviously the types of beds that you may have, they're med-surg, ICU, they're operating rooms, and making sure that you're inclusive of those individuals in the planning part of that project. So when you sit down and you start to look at the space, you got to keep in mind that this is the space that they're going to be working in. And if you don't include them as a part of that, you're not going to get the facility that you need or that your staff's going to want to work in. So by having them being a part of that and that process and including them, everything from, I'll just use this example, and in a patient room, the head wall of behind the bed of a patient and everything that goes in there and where you place everything. You got to keep in mind they're the ones that are in there providing that care. They're your frontline workers, and you have to take into consideration where do they want certain things. We obviously know that regulations and there's obviously other requirements that limit some of that, and as long as you obviously educate them and make them aware of that, and then you then take their consideration into that. You know, as I use the head wall, for example, and when we built the tower at Northeast, we brought all that staff in there, and they designed everything that went on that wall and where it was placed and where it was best. And then we obviously validated that, and then we brought it back to them, shared that with them, and then they made that last validation, and they actually signed off on the plan for what that room would look like, because that's where they were going to be the ones providing care to our patients.
Great, thanks, Noel. So it sounds like key stakeholder involved early in the process and choosing the right people to join that team. GK, from an owner perspective, what say you?
I think there are three important factors that I always think needs to be really ironed out ahead of a project. One is, what is the strategic driver for the project? Is it a mission-driven project? Is it a margin that you're chasing? And being able to articulate that driver very clearly first to your own owner's side and then to the team you're going to bring on board is very important, because that's the goal you're trying to get to. So that's factor number one. The second, you're very right, Noel, that having the right stakeholders, but I think having the right decision-making structure with the owner's side is absolutely critical. If you don't have that, decisions won't be made, you won't achieve your goal. And the third thing I would say is, when you start looking at a healthcare facility that's going to become a project, you really want to know who your team is going to be and who you're going to bring on board. Do they have experience? Do they have the knowledge? Can they pull this off most efficiently in the shortest time, given the driver you have? That might be your architects, your engineers, your contractors.
Thanks, GK. So Phil, from an architectural perspective, would you concur? What would you add here?
Well, certainly I would concur with particularly with the decision-making body, whether it's a board or a CEO or a general C-suite. You really have to know who your decision makers will be. Yes, we can talk to users, we can listen to them, but you have to understand the metrics of success, the metrics of will this be yes or no. And it's not often that clear who those decision makers are. Then you have to set your expectations to their vision. And it does take a while to do that. CEOs and other folks are doing so many other things, and building another building is very important and hundreds of millions of dollars, but they still have lots of other things to do. So you have to find a way to get their vision quickly and make sure that you follow that. Yes, stakeholders and all these things are very important. There's probably something else that I feel really important on ongoing success of a project, and that is the quality of the people, the positions that the hospital might put in front of the architect to interview with. You do have directors who have, let's say, 360-degree vision. Managers under those directors will have a little bit more focus, and they see the world often, if they're a hammer, they see everything as a nail. And you have to be really careful about how far down that ladder you go for your users, because you will be getting, very quickly, you'll be getting answers that are highly tuned to a particular department, and they're not taking into account the betterment of the entire organization. So when you do a patient tower, it's not just patient care. It's EVS and maintenance and pharmacy and RT and everybody else. I think it's very important to understand who are the people that you're interviewing and talking with, and who the decision makers are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, when you look at every part of an inpatient floor, I mean, you've got all sorts of different folks that are in there working, and the last thing you want to do is exclude, for example, where you keep the medications and not include the pharmacist or the pharm tech in that decision making. The same thing with respiratory when you look at where the gases are located. So all those different people, you got to make sure that you basically run off a checklist to say who needs and who needs to be part of that process? Because if you don't include them, you're going to find yourself later on going, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah.
And then to go back and change a project, and I know we'll probably talk about that a little bit later in the panel, to go back and change something is not easy, it's costly, and I've been there where something like that happened, and we had to completely redesign a room after the fact, and it costs more for the change orders and the redesigning of the room than what the original cost of the room was.
We joked about that in our rehearsal. Despite what people think, contractors do not like change orders.
Really?
I joked with these gentlemen saying I would love to do a project in my career once with 0 change orders. And what I mean by that is they're disruptive. It stops the sequencing. You go backwards. It costs everybody time and money, right? And a lot of times quality, unfortunately. And those are the 3 certainties as a contractor that we're hired to provide. Certainties of time, certainties of quality, and certainties of cost. So all joking aside with the change order, I agree 100% with these gentlemen about the stakeholders, decision makers, whatever term you want to use, how important that is upstream and downstream to have all of them engaged early as well, and if possible, engaged throughout the entire life cycle of the project. How many times do we have a project where someone gets infused or someone leaves midstream, and how disruptive that can be from not just the design, that ship sailed, right? Now we're talking about the construction, which we all know the curve of, right, when you make changes and when you don't make changes, that's not the time you want to make changes. I would also say, from a contractor's perspective, we should be a trusted advisor. We should be a steward for a lot of things, and that goes back to those certainties. And we know we're not in a certain time right now, right? What I mean from that is supply chain. There's a lot of uncertainties out there, and if anyone isn't aware of that, please come see me afterwards, and I'll love to give you what I know about this. Yeah, it's the trust, it's that, also communication. I'm sorry, that's the other bullet I wanted to bring up is honest, timely, transparent communication is key to success on every single project. I've learned that sometimes the hard way through my years, but that's what I try to preach to my people that I deal with on my team every single day. It's that open and honest and transparent communication.
Great, thanks, Corey. So I love that you mentioned stewardship. I think that's, critical for obviously a GC's perspective. And if I can ask you this follow-up question is, what types of decisions should be made early in the process to ensure a cost-effective process for the entire project?
That one's to me.
That was you. I know
Repeat
you mentioned
the question,
materials
please.
and logistics.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You have, as a contractor, you have to ask those questions to help steer the process. Once again, it's certainties. So right now, we should be brought on board early if possible to be able to help provide the information to help decisions to be made properly, whether, once again, it affects the cost, the time. The other part is those feasibility studies. If we're brought on board early, doesn't matter who it is, we can help steer this to allow the owner to make prudent decisions very, very early in the process so that it prevents slowdowns, it prevents overspends, and it prevents, a lot of times, speed to market. Sometimes that can be the driving factor right there for a client. And if we're brought on board early to do those front-end items, it definitely helps the process when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think that's key. As you mentioned, you want to bring somebody in who's done this before, that has a long-standing reputation. They can share what they've done other places, and just an example is an architect. You want to make sure you hire an architect that has obviously designed a healthcare facility before. As we sat down with the team, I still remember the architects that we had for the project up at Northeast, and they had a lot of experience, and they shared a lot of what had happened in other projects, lessons learned, and they obviously didn't want to see us make those same type of mistakes that they had seen other organizations do as we were designing the facility.
Great, thanks, Noel. So, Phil, from an architectural perspective, I know in our prep session you mentioned the importance of team over team, project over project. Can you tease that a little bit out for the audience?
Yeah, sure. All of us have different types of institutions, different size systems, different relationships, and certainly what we have done at Page is we've created a very long-term relationship with our clients, as GK and I were just talking about that. Even though I don't work on the TCH team, the TCH team is an ongoing entity in our office. There's familiarity project after project after project. With, for example, our Methodist work, we have the same team members involved since 2007. Can you imagine after 3 or 4 greenfield campuses, 3 or 4 tower projects, countless renovations, countless build-outs across different campuses, across different CEOs on the same campus? And we can bring such a deep familiarity to a project, to a campus, to a system, in where we're cross-pollinating. We're doing the cross-pollination from one campus to the other, to the other, to the other, that even the system really can't do without a very specific approach or intentional approach. As an example, was talking about one pharmacy, and I was able to bring together so many pharmacies within the system. And there's a tremendous amount of familiarity there. So what does that mean? One of the first decisions can be, I think the most important decision is getting teams that are familiar. It's not just enough to have an architect or consultants that have done this before. It's really important to have consultants that have worked together project after project and have worked with that client project after project after project, campus after campus. The learning curve is so small. Instead of learning your client for half the project, you're actually tweaking upon the previous success. If we did something successful on project A and we kept on building on that, can you imagine what F, G, and H projects are? How much more tweaked those are? How you've learned from your mistakes that were seen as successes back then, but you're just making them better and better. And so I think getting a team that works together is very important, in a team that's worked with you. There's a reason why, for example, any sports team tries to bring their championship teams back year after year, because your competition is really good. You have to be a little bit better. And having that team together is what allows that team to deliver for the client, for the system.
Fantastic. GK, you have a unique perspective being in an intersection between an owner and an architect. I'm curious, what types of decisions do you think should be made early in the process, given your background?
Yes, I think I'll go to 3 important things again. When you are starting on a project, there's one critical decision you want to make, is what is the box you're planning for, right? What is it? What is the size you're trying to hit? And that's your short-term goal. There's also a long-term for that facility. What does that look like? Because you have to establish both those goalposts to be able to make certain decisions right in the first place. Second, you need to have all your decisions in place regarding your data, because your data is going to drive the box. Like, what are you planning for? What are the volumes? What is the market you're targeting? How does that translate into the box you're trying to design? And then it's very important that that box is filled with the right-sized departments. That decision will cost you a huge amount in the long term. And from a business term, you might find it pretty easy to fund that extra square footage. However, if you look at the long term and look at the net present value of the operating costs of overbuilding it, it will blow your mind what it means today. So it's very important that that decision of right-sizing the department be made today, and then you leave some flexibility to grow into the space. On the flip side of that, I'll also say there are decisions that should not be made early, right? There is a right time to make certain decisions, and you got to wait for them because they'll cost you. If you make a decision too early, it'll cost you a lot more in the long run. So you have to wait for the right time, no later, no sooner, to make those kind of decisions. And that's, a lot of you will know, the right type of equipment. You don't want to make that decision ahead. You want to make it at the right time. So there's a balance.
Great. I like that. Some ambiguity in there, and I think that's healthy. Did you have something to add?
Sure, that's a perfect segue on the decisions. It depends upon the project, right? I think the first step is don't be afraid to ask questions on what the drivers are, what the important items are, what the end result it has to be. But from a decision standpoint, we talked about this on Friday. It's also our job as a contractor, once again taking a contractor's perspective, to educate the team on when those decisions have to be made, whether it's a piece of medical equipment, flexibility. I know as an owner, you guys want the flexibility to be able to make the decision that's going to be for the best performance and the utilization for the end in mind, right? For whether it's imaging a piece of equipment, whatever it is. But it's also our job as a steward of the entire project to steer that process to be able to say, okay, you've got X amount of weeks or X amount of months or whatever it is, but when that date comes, here's the ramifications. Because if we don't make that decision, we know what's going to happen. Project time is going to slip, speed to market's going to slip, the ability to actually see your patients is going to push out. So it's once again, I'm going to go back to that word of communication. It's that open and honest, transparent communication that is so imperative for the decisions to be made at the right time, as well as keep the project flowing to not cause disruptions.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, when you put those dates up there, you've got to stick to them. And the best thing to do that, the best way of doing that is by communicating that to the team and making sure they understand what the ramifications are if you don't, if that date slides, what's the impact going to be, financial, or what it may do to the organization, what it may hold up. And the other part of it too is as you push one out, it pushes everything else out. And I've been there where one project went too long, and the cost in that were, when you had to go back and explain that, it wasn't a pleasant experience.
So, Noel, you just mentioned, the importance of following the schedule, which leads to staying on budget. Right. How do you remain just cost aware, but also try to infuse innovation when you're building?
Yeah, so, when you start to look at facilities, especially now more than ever, you've got to obviously take your energy costs into account. We all want to become more and more energy efficient. We want to make our facilities very green compliant, but at the same time, you also want to make sure they meet the needs of the care you're providing, as well as meet the needs of the team. I think what you're finding more and more is that these cost-efficient energy, and what it's going to do is you may pay more upfront for a lot of this, and I think you've got to get leaders to understand is there's a cost of doing this, but in the long run, this is what it's going to save you, and it'll be a benefit to you. The other thing that you got to keep in mind with innovation is as time changes, your facilities may change as well, your space. It's also key that we GK mentioned, obviously the box, but you also don't want to, sell yourself short in the future in that it's, our CFO keeps telling me it's easier for me to put up walls in something that's already established as opposed to coming back and building a new facility. So as you look at all this, you've got to be thinking into the future, all those costs, as well as what you may be doing in the future as far as expansion and adding additional services. For our system now, we're operating under a service line model, so we have to take into consideration the service line perspective and making sure that they have input on what we're trying to do going forward into the future.
Great, Noel. Phil, how do you take in that intersection, given, I think there's a certain ability to steward as well in your role. How do you meet that intersection when you're aware of the cost impacts, but you want to infuse technology? How do you advise your clients?
Well, I think that's an issue we all kind of have to figure out on a project-by-project basis. I am a firm believer that that the game is won long before it begins. You have to have an understanding of what the goal is and have a budget set for that. It's very difficult to reconcile those issues after the project started. Depending on the institution, you can add some dollars for particular innovations and so forth afterwards, but once you have set that budget, Noel, you're right. I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen CEOs make sure that the design team feels the pain that they're feeling when they go to the board. So you really have to stick with it. I've been blessed with a lot of the program managers I work with will support and require us to represent them to even the users and the various stakeholders, that once a square footage, for example, is set or an approach is set, that it's really fairly inviolate on those changes. I have had institutions, CEOs say that we're going to stay with what we have. Even though a particular user director doesn't like something, we're going to live with it for a year, and we're going to see how that fits you. And 9 times out of 10, it does fit them well. It's just these users don't really necessarily, they don't see all the possibilities that can happen. So I think it's a very strict process we have to follow, and it's just that simple.
Great. Just a quick follow-up on that. So you mentioned, I'm just curious, you mentioned preferences to have the same project teams time over time in order to have that efficiency. I wonder, given my role in technology, how does a vendor like ours really start to engage to show, those teams who have potentially been working project over project, the potential benefits? You mentioned, sometimes the technology will be tough in CapEx, but you can recover in OpEx. What advice would you give to vendors to, who'd want to join that table or who'd want to provide, technological input on the value that we could bring?
Well, I think there's a lot of players in a project, from a program manager who have brought technology to the table. We've had directors and users bring technology to the table. We've had designers and engineers. And so really it's making sure that all the players have a certain amount of exposure, minimum exposure to the industry for types of changes and different ideas and different products and different approaches, and encouraging those team members to bring that to the table. It's quite often that we hear, for example, we're talking robotic delivery of pharmacy, of meds. That is a recent example that's being brought to us at the director level. And then there are new construction products that are being brought to the table by designers, interior designers, engineers. And so I think it's really making sure that everybody involved is trying to be the A team, being at the top of their game, and bringing everything in kind of more organically.
Great, thank you. Corey, I know that you're the steward and cost control. How do you, take in innovation and really guide the clients with also curbing their expectations?
Sure, so a little bit more of a practical approach, focusing on the world we live in right now, is that early engagement, I believe, of a contractor to help steer those certainties once again, with the supply chain issues that we all know we're incurring, the cost implications to those, as well as the lead times associated with those, are paramount right now, because no one really knows when that's going to level out and when it's going to stop. I mean, everybody's, is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it beyond that? I don't have that answer, but I do feel like we have our finger on the pulse to be able to advise and provide that guidance to help provide informed decisions upstream to our clients and to our design teams that we're working with. Once again, is it speed to market? A lot of times it is. So how do we help steer this process with the certainties that we can provide by going out and doing all that research, the feasibility studies, the talking with the supply chain folks that are upstream and downstream for us. So I think that's, from a practical standpoint, I think that's very, very viable in today's world.
Thanks, Corey. GK, you mentioned in our prep session the term pool planning. Want to expand on that a little bit?
Right, and I would talk about innovation and cost efficiency. There are several fronts to that. You can talk about innovation in your process, in your design process, in your construction, in operating your facility, and pool planning is one of the things you can do in your design process during construction to make sure that you're holding the right people accountable, getting the right decisions made towards getting to your goal, to completing a design. But one thing I would like to also add to that is, from an owner's perspective, going back to the innovation and the ability to keep innovation and give yourself some room, the key is to be flexible, but to identify the bottlenecks today. An example of that would be, we all know in the next 10 years, it's going to be a world that's Internet of Things. So what is the bottleneck that we can address today? That's the IT infrastructure, right? You need to build that into your project and protect it. Garages are another example. Like in 10 years from now, will we need parking garages? But we have to build them today. So what is the flexibility you're giving yourself so those garages can adapt and change? Can they have the right floor-to-floor height that those garages can be adaptive and convert to another function? So those are just some examples that from an owner's side, when you're doing a project, you give yourself some room for innovation, but give it to the right pieces, give it to the right infrastructure elements that you can plug and play eventually. And innovation is in everything. In your process, in construction, can we do modular construction? Can it be assembled off-site? What can we do to, again, be cost efficient?
Great. So we've talked about several items: cost, innovation, and I want to just steer a little bit toward the partners on this one, just around standard project design, so concept, schematic development, construction. Do you think that's still relevant? And I'll again, keep this to the partners, Phil and Corey. Is this still a relevant model in that order, or, given what we've just been through over the last, 2 years? I don't even know how long it's been at this point, but, is there room for change?
Well, I think there already is change. There's a whole rainbow of different delivery methods and different phasing, and I think all of those options are still on the table. So it is answers D, all the above. Yes, there are projects that from a delivery standpoint or a timeline standpoint can handle SD, DD, CD, bid, and so forth. And then there are projects that might be extremely accelerated on the other end of the spectrum, which is completely valid. By the time that from the time that you start schematic design to being in the ground with foundations might be 5 months. And this would be, for a 500,000 square foot building. And so the process, the packaging, the delivery is going to be very different based on the building type. Fast track packages where you're at SD for one package, you're at CA for other packages. It does make it particularly difficult in those examples because when you're doing foundation and laying down slab concrete, you have to know where every toilet and every plumbing fixture is, even though you may not be at that stage for tenant improvement. The tenant improvement may not really need to be done for another 8-9 months, but you still have to make those commitments. So then you'll have, having a CM at risk and having design assist is extraordinarily important. You can cut months and months off with design assist. There are challenges with every type of delivery method. So
So it sounds like it's dependent on each project.
Absolutely project dependent.
Okay, Corey, do you think that's the similar experience there?
The easiest answer I can give is it depends, right? Which is not a simple answer. I think, once again, it depends upon the project, the complexity, the time. It's everything that Phil spoke about. There's never a one-size-fits-all. I think that has to be discussed very early, pre-programming, to determine what makes the most sense for the delivery of that specific project. In some instances, we know it's a simple job, a competitive sealed proposal, simple, no big deal. Complex projects with a time constraint, maybe it's more of a design build or a design assist. Something that's a more invasive and complex project where you don't have a lot of clarity going into, that may lend itself towards a CM at risk where you partner early. So they're all tried and true methods. We've all worked with them. I think, once again, it just depends. It depends upon the uniqueness of that specific project, and that's where that communication has to come into play very, very early so that collectively the team makes the right decision on how they're going to deliver the project.
Great, again, so it sounds like time, complexity, and then having the same partners on, having a familiarity would also be good here. So just to close it out, I know, the title of this is streamlining the process, but I don't want to lose in that cost ambition, the innovation, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the patients and providing them the best access to care. So I'm curious, GK and Noel, if you can give a quick story pertaining to how you've infused innovation or how you see us moving forward. We're entering a new space in 2022, hopefully more open, and to GK's point, in 3D. So how can we do that?
Well, I think with any project, there's always managing expectations. I still remember having to sit down and talking with leaders about here's what you're wanting, here's what we can do, and trying to get to a middle ground. So it all became a negotiation game. But ultimately, when you're looking at, when you look at innovation, I'll just use an example. I still recall when we were building the tower on Fort Sam Houston, and we were relocating the burn unit. And they wanted to really come up with something innovative, and that was they wanted to make sure that they were providing the best healing environment for these patients. And they wanted to make sure that they had, windows. Well, when you have windows, you got to manage the climate and the temperatures. And when you're dealing with burn patients, that's not easy. So they had to get very innovative in one meeting, kind of trying to find that right mix of having that innovation, having that great healing environment, but yet managing, how we were going to do that. And they were able to get to that. And ultimately, they built the best healing environment for our service members that had sustained, and even not just service members, but we actually treated civilians, everybody south of Austin. We took care of burn patients. But they did create that. Ultimately, they were able to get that. And again, it took a lot of creative minds. But I think when you get the right people in the right room and you're looking for a vision and where you're trying to go, you can get to it as long as you really do manage expectations throughout that process.
I love that. GK, close us out.
So I'll take a little bit of a blue sky approach here, and I'll say one thing. We all design buildings. Those buildings are here for 50, 60 years. They're not a 5-year deal. They're not a 10-year deal. The programs that go inside the building are probably 5 years, 10 years, 15 years max. So if you take that approach, whatever decisions or whatever buildings we're designing right now have to undergo change at least 3 or 4 times in their lifetime. So what are we doing today to be innovative, to preserve the flexibility, and to make sure that those buildings adapt and can be reused over time? So I think in my perspective, putting my architect's hat on, there are certain elements that we need to protect when we are designing a building that will last 50 years. The horizontal circulations, the vertical circulations, the right size, the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, the HVAC infrastructure, so that it can be plug and play over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And then there are elements like what type of glass you're using. Can that be more energy efficient? Going back to your point, Noel, that's going to be huge for us. How sustainable is the building? Because the operating costs of such buildings are really going to make or break you and keep you competitive going forward. I would close by saying that we need to take a longer view to the building and not respond to the program. The program is the program. Yes, that makes sense. But it is going to last for 5, 10 years. The building is going to last longer. So let's think from that perspective.
Fantastic. Round of applause for a great audience, for a great panel.
Hi, everybody. All right, so the panelists and I all know we're standing between you guys and lunch, so the energy is going to be off the charts. Getting ready. So my name is Kelly Bloom. We're joking a little bit about the dark side. Construction companies are not the dark side. The insurance brokers are the real dark side. So I'm with Aon. We do risk consulting. We work with owners, developers, construction firms, and some of the money as well to think through risk. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a deep dive into the leasing and developments going on right now. So I'd like the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Craig Lahr. I'm a senior vice president with Metastar. I am the executive in charge of the project caddy corner from here for the Texas A&M Innovation Plaza. I've been an industry veteran of 31 years now, primarily healthcare real estate development.
Hey everybody, Justin Brazel with Transwestern. I lead our healthcare and life sciences brokerage team here in Houston. We've got a great team here, and been with Transwestern going on 14 years, and so yeah, I'm almost halfway to you. So.
Hi, I'm Caroline Chiodo with Healthcare Trust of America. I run our acquisitions and development opportunities for the company. I've been at the company on the corporate side for about 4 years now, and previously I spent 15 years on the institutional investment funds.
Great. So we're going to get started talking a little bit about some of the changes we've seen. Obviously, we've talked a bit this morning about the changing landscape, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing nationally versus locally, and the differences that you're seeing there. Repurposing space, greenfields, those kinds of things.
Well, sure. I think nationally, we're seeing the continuing trend towards more services due to changes in technology being housed in the outpatient environment. It's a lower cost delivery. We're seeing a whole lot of that. It depends locally, it depends upon, of course, where you are. Here in the Texas Medical Center, outpatient is on campus, so a lot of the facilities that are here are being brought out of the hospital, that those that can, and be provided more efficiently in the outpatient environment. That is one big trend that's happening nationally and locally. It's just happening a little bit differently in the larger medical centers, this being the largest medical center in the world right here.
Yeah, to add to that, I think that, we do a lot of medical office. That's kind of our bread and butter, so not as much of the acute care stuff. And I would say across the country and in Houston, we're seeing a lot more of that hospitality come into the space. Patients have more choice, staff have more choice about who they work with. There's a war on talent. We've talked about that. There's staff shortages, there's staff burnout. So, as a practice, how do you retain staff? It's expensive to lose staff. It costs you at least a year, typically, of their salary to retrain somebody, to replace them. So how do you keep staff, keep them happy? How do you retain patients, grow patients in a more and more competitive environment? And so we're seeing a lot more of the hospitality, flexible workspace in MOBs for loved ones who bring their spouse or kids to go see a physician. Well, oftentimes they're taken off work. So if they're going to be there for 2 hours, they may drop their spouse off, and they need a place to, grab their laptop or their iPad or their phone and get work done. Be productive. They can't afford to lose 2 hours out of a workday just to drive somebody to an appointment. And so I think that we're seeing a lot more of that. People are trying to be more forward-thinking in a traditionally, institutional type of landscape when it comes to architecture and design of medical office. And so I think that, we're seeing that across the country, but really in Houston in a big way. I mean, we're bringing in architects. A lot of the architects that are in the space are great at what they do, and they're very talented, and they're there. We're even talking about bringing in, hospitality architects, retail architects, people that are not really in the healthcare space to give a different lens on how do you design, maybe it's not the patient, the clinic, but how do you design the common area? How do you design ingress and egress? So I think, we're heading in that direction more and more every day.
Great. I would just say if we take a step back and just look at the overall industry, I think relative to other asset classes, it's just important to state that medical office remains very steady from a leasing standpoint and well occupied overall. So during the global pandemic, all of our buildings remained open and operating, and the majority of all of our tenants were seeing patients. There was that slight period where everyone had to shut down, but after that, we're all back to providing care within the community. This differs dramatically relative to just traditional office space or retail space that have been impacted by Amazons, et cetera. So I think in general, the biggest takeaway was things remained pretty stable, which was positive. I would say broader picture in terms of bigger trends on the leasing standpoint, I think everyone sort of looked at their admin space in reevaluating the work from home and how much time they went for that. But from a clinical side, we haven't seen massive changes yet in terms of space requirements of physicians providing care for their patients.
That's great to note. And Justin, you mentioned a little bit about the change in what you're seeing in the spaces. What other physical changes are you seeing in the spaces? I know we talked earlier about HVAC systems, but certainly a lot of different kinds of physical changes happening in the spaces.
Yeah, I would say we took, with a handful of clients, we took a pretty in-depth dive on early in the pandemic, first half of 2020 on, hey, how can we pivot? How can we get clinics opened back up as quickly as possible and safely? And I think that we ran through a bunch of ideas. We had a lot of consultants. We had a lot of pricing, pricings come back from some proposed initiatives. And the reality of it is, after all that was said and done, we did kind of enhance the HVAC system with additional HEPA filters and things like that. That was just kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit. If we didn't have touchless fixtures, touchless fixtures is minimal touches from the vehicle to the clinic and then back. And then the rest of it really, they were bigger ticket items, and they didn't really implement that, and the patients and the tenants really didn't push back and say that they needed anything in addition to that. So that's been our experience on kind of the physical change. There are still some folks that are looking at it maybe. We have some people that are trying to shrink waiting rooms and create more common space where you can touchdown space for the loved ones. And then we have other groups that are saying, well, maybe we expand our waiting rooms and create a little bit more flexibility there so that you have more space, because some folks are still waiting in their cars and being texted or called to come up to see their physicians. And so it's really like, how does that work? So I think it's interesting. The waiting room the waiting room game is going kind of two different ways based on people's perception of how that space should flow.
Great. Are you seeing some, Craig, I know you just built you're building a beautiful brand new building, catty corner from here. So those of you who are leaving, make sure you check that out. But I mean, certainly that had some new technology requirements that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah, we recognize that, how could we not, indoor air quality, it's an issue. So we're doing our best to address that with the integrated viral protection technology. And we are designing it into the Horizon Tower, which is the project we are JVing with the Healthcare Trust of America, co-developing. We are designing right into the HVA systems a coronavirus killing, catches and kills the coronavirus. So it's a cutting-edge technology. It's a new invention by our CEO. We also have mobile units, the ones that you see here out in the pre-function area, that we're going to be various sizes deploying into the student housing facility. So we have a 19-story student housing facility. We have wall units. We have those more like you see for the lobbies and larger areas. So indoor air quality is an issue. It's an issue about overall back to healthcare, where the patient wants to get their care. Whether it's online, whether it's in the depths and the bowels of a large medical center that is heavily inpatient. During times when we've had the pandemic spike, we saw a whole lot of elective procedures that were operating in and near medical centers, large medical centers, that were being suspended. Okay, so that has really created an acceleration of the trend towards more outpatient medical office buildings and places that can do a whole lot more in the office, in the outpatient setting, than they could do before. But we're seeing a trend for well buildings and indoor air quality being addressed, because obviously it reached everyone's mind here, the whole world's mind here recently, and we're trying to do something about it in our facilities.
I can't wait to go over there and check that out. So I expect an invitation when it's done.
Yeah.
All right.
You bet.
Great. Caroline, how about yourself? Are you seeing any physical requirements changing in that space?
I mean, I still think it's still very early in terms of trying to come up with the future clinical space post-pandemic. I think that the very easy things that we're seeing are sure for touchless faucets, touchless door entries, trying to make things more automatic. Those were not massive innovative technologies, but just rolling out because everyone understands, from a sanitary standpoint, where we want to go in the future.
Great. Are you guys seeing changes in specialties, demand? I know we've seen a lot more demand around specialists for autism, for example. So the tenant-based, are you seeing that change, Caroline?
I think what I had mentioned before is the largest shift that we're seeing is health systems looking at contracting their admin space and non-clinical space, given that work from home dynamic. On the specialty side, I think everyone recognizes that there is a very, very large need for mental and behavioral health services provided. We're still trying to work with the providers to have enough care and sort of roll that out. I think that's sort of a focus for everyone to make sure that those services are offered within the community. But we haven't yet seen any significant changes in any of the specialties. Our tenants typically are multi-specialty groups and multi-tenanted, where we always think that having a multi-tenanted medical office building allows for all of the doctors and physicians to create an ecosystem where the referrals keep going, so then it is sort of sticky for their patient flow. But in addition, it allows, from a consumer standpoint, a one-stop shop. Sort of what Craig was saying before. I mean, prior to COVID, the shift was going more outpatient versus inpatient, just as more and more services can be provided from a technology standpoint in an outpatient setting. Consumers prefer to be closer to their home. It's easier to park. It's easier to get in and out of. And more importantly, for all stakeholders involved, it is a cheaper, lower cost alternative versus having someone in the higher cost hospital setting.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I think that what we're seeing from a tent perspective is a lot of private equities pouring into the space. So, we're seeing behavioral health for sure. From a PE perspective, derm or retina or a handful of other specialties, healthcare is kind of an inefficient space, and that continues into the practice side of things. A lot of independent practices or regional practices that don't have a lot of buying power, maybe not highly sophisticated on the business side in terms of how to run the business as opposed to seeing patients. And so these groups are coming in and acquiring a bunch of these specialties or subspecialties. Overnight they have better contracts. So they're coming in and they get an automatic, revenue enhancement day one with doing the exact same amount of work. They outsource billing. They create some best practices inside that practice and say, hey, listen, you're doing business this way, but why don't you do it this way? And so, we're seeing that it kind of started with derm and then retina and then behavioral health, autism, and so as these practices are being consolidated, not only in Houston or across the state, across the country, the physicians are selling out of half their practice, maintaining some kind of equity there, and then from a landlord's perspective, you're kind of getting a little bit of a credit enhancement, and then oftentimes when that group comes in, private equity, and they create a more efficient practice, they start recruiting more physicians to those sites, and those locations oftentimes grow as well. So from you put your landlord hat on, you're getting a little bit better credit, you're getting a better operator, a better practice, and then oftentimes they're expanding within 12 months of being acquired because they've kind of dialed in that operation.
Craig, you were going to say a little something about what you're seeing in the tenant space.
Well, I don't think it's so much the names of the specialties or different varieties. It's how they're planned together in an integrated way. You're sort of referencing multi-specialty clinics, practices being owned by private equity. They're becoming more efficient because they're really seeing a lot of reimbursement amounts being cut, and it always a trend, and it's an issue. And so they're being a lot more efficient about how they go about their planning their spaces, and in a lot of cases, more practices are becoming employed by the hospital health system as well, and that changes the way they're planned. You have a clinic model versus an independent practice model. But all in all, what I think has been real important and has stayed as a long-term trend is the sort of integrated medical plaza with you have the medical office, physician offices, potentially outpatient surgery, outpatient rehab, and diagnostic and imaging all under one roof. That's been a real successful model for some time anywhere, if you're talking on a national basis and including the South. But I think what's happening down here is there's been practice in medicine has been a little bit more of a traditional and less affected by managed care than other markets. And so you've seen a lot more independent physician practices, and that changes the way your office is designed versus a clinic model or an employed model. So those are a couple of points to follow on what Justin was saying.
Well, it's curious too. I've seen less vertical integration from the private equity and more specialty, like you said, derm, going in and doing several derm practices at once and collating there on that. One of the other questions I had a little bit about, and that drives the demand, is we talked earlier about community hospitals, micro hospitals moving out. Certainly, Houston's quite the sprawl. I think, Craig, you said it took you 2 hours this morning to get from the Woodlands.
It took me 2 hours to get to from the Woodlands.
Anybody else in the 2-hour plus club? I see a couple of folks. Thank you for making the effort. And hopefully it's blue skies when we walk out of here. But certainly a push on that. Has that affected the demand in the medical center versus out, or is it just all rising water, all ships?
The medical center is unique, and it hasn't. It's really more of, there is more of an outreach because it is a sprawling city to do more outpatient medical office buildings, bringing the healthcare to the customer. That's certainly been a big trend. And if you get up to the Woodlands, you've seen what's happened over the last few years about how much healthcare has been built up there, starting with the hospitals, and Methodist up there is already expanded. So. And you have the major systems all being represented up there, and then you have the medical office asset class well represented up there, and all the outpatient services. So no, this is a unique, this is the 8th largest business district in the United States, the Texas Medical Center, just any business district. I mean, if they don't do it here, they don't do it anywhere. Okay, so you have all of the specialties, subspecialties, and a lot of folks talk about how big it is. The quality is exact. So it's a unique animal, so to speak. But the trend for outpatient in the great suburbs that we have is certainly continuing and growing, because not everyone can, on a day like today, drive 2 hours for a procedure, right? They're just not going to do it to see their primary care physician if they live that far out.
Yeah, out of that, I think, a lot of people that are not knee-deep in healthcare, and I think, most people in the room are, as you probably know this, but, people outside looking in are always asking, okay, well, tell me about the med center, tell me about TMC, and so you can talk about all these great things, over 50 million square feet, 10 million patient visits a year, 60-plus member institutions. You can kind of walk through all of that, and it really is fascinating, and there's so many great things happening here, but from a physical place and from occupancy and from that angle, historically, the med center has been 97, 98% leased, and I think in the last handful of years, call it 5 years, there's been it's a little bit of a softer market, but it's because there's a little bit of a transition. To Craig's point, a lot of the non-acute users are getting out of the TMC proper, right? So, if you are, let's just call it a dermatologist. We're talking about derm. So if you're a dermatologist, do you really need to be on the 14th floor of a building? A patient comes in, tries to navigate to whichever parking garage you're supposed to be at, go up 12 floors, 8 floors, down the elevator, over and up for an annual checkup, maybe not, right? Cardiology, absolutely. And so I think it just depends. The specialties are kind of changing in the med center. And so we're in a little bit of a transition where, and also, so the non-critical specialties in large part are decanting and moving out to the periphery. I mean, Bel Air, they don't have to be all the way in the Woodlands or Pearland, but, in the periphery, that easier ingress and egress back to, patients have more choice, and you need them to decide that they're going to come in to see you. And then you're getting a little bit of a revitalization with more of the critical stuff backfilling. And also, in addition to that, in the med center, which is really kind of fascinating, is a lot of the typical medical office buildings have been acquired by health systems, and so you get a little bit of a negative supply as well, where one building could be A&M, for example, it's 277,000 square foot building. That building was, a medical office building, and then it got acquired by Texas A&M, and now it's the InMed program, and so that 277,000 square feet is no longer part of the supply, and so it's kind of an interesting change, but we are seeing a lot of those specialties are still very much here, but some of the non-critical guys are floating out a little bit for patient experience.
So I'm a construction insurance person, so I have to ask this question. Have you seen the supply change, the labor, all of these rising prices? Has it affected the rental rates at all, or?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that from HTA's standpoint. So on a year-to-date basis, we've done over 2 million square feet of leasing for our company, which includes about 1.5 million square feet of renewals. And on all of those renewals, we've seen a mark-to-market of like 2.7% overall. So prices are continuing to go up. I would say from a construction impact, we continue to see rising prices within the construction and supply chain. We haven't seen any significant decreases yet, in addition to the labor shortages that we had talked about previously. So that being said, the difference between our leased and occupancy rate, like on a year-over-year basis last year, maybe it was 50 basis points to 100 basis points spread between what your leased rate was and how quickly you can get folks in. It's widened to about 170 basis points right now, which is one of the largest we've had, just given sort of the delays from permitting and work shortages and supplies. So I don't have a magic ball. I don't know if anyone else does to when it gets better, but right now we are seeing the impact there.
Yeah, I really wish it would get better, because it makes our job a lot harder as leasing agents to try to convince a landlord to take a lower margin, a lower return, to give more tenant improvement allowance and not increase the rental rate. So we've been, and by the way, this is not a new issue. We've been having this conversation struggle for the last 8+ years, but even more so with COVID. And I've talked to 3 or 4 GCs in the last 45 days, because they're repricing some of the deals. I mean, it takes us, oftentimes it'll take us 9 months, 12 months to get a lease from, initial tour to fully executed, everything's permitted and ready to go. And so some of these contractors are having to reprice this work. And there's a 15 to 30% increase year over year from today versus 12 months ago. And so, how do you reconcile that when, you have a fully executed lease with a the base rental schedule is already there. And so the tenant now is saying, well, hold on, this is what I expected to happen, and now I've got to write a big check. So we either have to amend the lease and amortize more tenant improvement allowance into the base rate, or they just have to bite the bullet and write a check, or go to their preferred lender, and get a loan. I mean, it's not a good situation for anybody. Like nobody wins here. So it's been a challenge. And by the way, the contractors, everybody, I'm asking them, when is it going to get better? And I don't even want to tell you the answer, because it's not a good answer. So.
The good news is, strategically, we made an investment last year to do some spec suites. So we did build out a significant amount of spec suites. So if anyone needs any space, I do have some ready to go. and it's beautiful. Let me tell you, we've seen whatever colors you want, we can get on the wall. But otherwise, that we most likely will continue to do that to help people just try and shorten that window. Because like I said, everyone is trying to plan appropriately, but things, you know, it's nice when the space is already ready to be moved in.
And that's just to talk to you about the spec suites. We're huge advocates of the spec suite program. We love that. We promote that across our entire portfolio. But it goes back to now, instead of doing an $80, $90, $100 square foot spec suite, we're asking landlords to do a $140 square foot spec suite. Right. And they're saying, okay, well, hold on. How long is it going to take me to lease it? How certain are you? And by the way, are somebody to move in right now and not change a thing, or are they going to want to move a wall? You know? And so the spec suite concept was a little bit harder. It's always been a hard sell, but people have kind of seen it working. But when you have another $40 a square foot for a landlord to say, I'm just going to write a check and hope that somebody occupies it, you know, big REITs and guys like, you know, people like you, you know, you've got breadth and depth, but you have a single owner that owns an 80,000 square foot medical office building in Houston, Texas, you know, they take a different look at it.
Yep, for sure. Craig, have you seen any impacts on delays? I mean, you've got this project going. How's it clicking along?
You know, we were over there yesterday again, and truthfully, we're slightly ahead of schedule. We've been fortunate. We did design in the middle of the pandemic the student housing facility that you can see from the balcony here, and I can tell you that it caused a lot of delays in design and then we got going because we were all learning WebEx on the fly, right? So I don't want to take everybody back there. Everyone's been through the throes of the deepest part of what that all caused for everybody else. All those same things translated into things like designing buildings. But we were able to, one thing that we were not seeing that we thought we would see from the pandemic was deflation. We really didn't see deflation in construction prices. We all thought it was going to happen due to the lack of building projects or for whatever reason, and that never really happened. We've seen things like wood go up, come down, and then go back up again. A lot of the different inputs and construction materials have done the same thing. So it's the point I'm trying to get to on that is it's a lot easier to recognize and understand and manage an actual trend. I don't know what we're seeing here, though, now is a trend. I think it's a lot of volatility, a whole lot of volatility. You have all of these shocks. You have the federal government big spend. That's going to probably challenge in a couple of years, at least down the road, of the availability of labor for large construction projects with all these infrastructure projects going on. The perception alone will add to it. I think we could probably expect that. But you know, we all know what we went through as a public health issue, and now we're seeing inflation everywhere. Energy prices are an issue, not just that some construction materials are made from you know, energy processes and inputs, but just operating factories cost effectively with energy prices spiking. We got, and I don't personally, we hope we've seen the last of it, but you know, we have to be prepared for other spikes in the pandemic and or you know, whole new pandemics. I mean, we have to be prepared for that. And so I think we're seeing some really a high amount of volatility, shocks from both fiscal shocks with these large spending bills. Now we have inflation, energy prices, and it's a lot to deal with out there right now. So yeah, we are fortunate. We just are to have the construction, and we have a strong team staying on schedule. But you know, the biggest challenge right now with a large construction project is buying it out for what your pro forma says, because there's so much volatility. Because on a large project with a longer schedule duration, things are changing so quickly, and you have to react to it. So, you know, outpatient trends, okay, that's been a trend that's going on for some time. It's accelerated, boom, that's a trend. I don't know what we're seeing right now exactly. I think it's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm not smart enough to say what's going to happen. So.
It is hard to distill what we're seeing into a single trend. I think that's very true. I know I'm dealing with a lot of project delays and extensions on the insurance, and supply on the insurance side doesn't like that either. So I always advise clients when they're working on a project to build in that wiggle room, because what ends up happening is even not just the supply, but the phasing, right? So you think you're going to do the drywall, but that has to push back because you don't have the HVAC. I mean, so you start to see the phasing back up on itself. So, but it is hard to distill to a single trend. I think you summed it up best and said volatility. I like that trend. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. We haven't had questions thus far, and I'm looking over at the Bisnow team, and they're going to put it up for me, I think. Or you guys can raise your hands. You guys have heard a lot of panels this morning, some fantastic thoughts. Anybody have questions for these panelists in particular?
Investment trends?
Sure, I could talk about that. So, like I started the conversation, medical office continues to be a very stable asset class in general. So, capital continues to come into the industry. They want to reallocate from their portfolios in traditional office, retail, et cetera, and they understand sort of the benefits there. So, we've seen some large, overall large private equity groups actually come in and look to expand their portfolios. I will say that we remain a very small industry relative to traditional office. So if someone wants to come in and just spend $1 billion, it's not that easy. So therefore, overall pricing remains very aggressive. We've seen cap rates come down anywhere from 50 to 100 basis points just because there isn't as much quality supply. That's also a function of the industry. Overall, there isn't really a lot of spec medical office development. Just because we build a building doesn't mean it will, therefore people move in. So that's always helped the long-term trend of occupancy, et cetera. That is a big differentiator versus sort of multifamily or office, et cetera. So overall, investment continues and capital continues to pour into medical office, and we've seen asset prices rise. So while we're on the topic, if any health systems want to monetize any of their assets, feel free to reach out. We've got plenty of capital to
Right
to
after I
allocate.
lease your spec suite.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's helped, pardon me, Justin, she made me think of something, where something is more volatile in construction prices and generally rising overall, the developer spread, which is kind of what we kind of focus on, is the difference at where you exit versus what you build it for, the return at what you build it for. And that trend going on, which is sort of an independent trend of private capital, a lot of private equity and hedge funds coming into the medical office asset class, has produced cap rate compression that does help with dealing with the higher construction prices, because you still can get a spread as a developer.
No, and that's a great point. And just to add to that, we do a lot of investment sales, and it was interesting. We're taking a few buildings out to market in January, and we're preparing the offering memorandum and whatnot for that opportunity. And so we were at another conference last week or the week before, and we were talking to the buy side brokers that are early out there trying to find deals on behalf of their clients. And they said, man, we've almost given up because it's such a competitive landscape out there that if you don't control the deal on the seller, if you're representing the buyer, you're swinging 10, 20 times and you're closing one transaction because it's so competitive out there. So yeah, continue to see a compression in cap rates, and then even underwriting. It's really fascinating to see how aggressive these acquisitions folks are getting on retention rates and year-over-year annual increases and base rental increases and TIs on renewals, and they've got to squeeze every one of those to figure out how do they get the highest price. So it's been interesting to see that continue to happen. I thought a year ago we wouldn't see a whole lot more compression. I just I was like, how can it continue to compress, and it has. So. That's a tricky question. I would say, high level, I don't see a whole lot of, I wouldn't call it pressure. I think that, the health systems typically are building really great quality product on campus, and they have really healthy TIs, and they have, very aggressive rental rates. So from an economics perspective, it's kind of a lot of times a win-win for the practice group. They get in at a lower cost into a very high quality building, and they're walking, right across the street, right across the parking lot for the OR. So I would say, I feel like it's those physicians are typically pretty happy to take occupancy on campus.
Where the pressure lies is that the healthcare system just isn't allowed to give the space away at a discount in exchange for referrals, right? It's a no-no. So the pressure comes in properly done is their charge market, and there's pressure because there's other places for an office to go. So that's where the tension comes in. So really, it's back to the tradition of the relationship that the physician has with the hospital that really drives that. But a lot of doctors who don't need to be on campus, have interest in going elsewhere, perhaps where it's not so close to the urban core, or just it's out in a building that perhaps will be leased by or owned by a private owner, and it'll be at a rental rate that's not as expensive as it is on campus. So that's where the stress comes in.
Great. Any other questions? You guys have any closing thoughts that you'd like to offer?
No, we got to get to lunch.
We're 3 minutes. We're 3 minutes past lunch. So
See,
yeah.
They are well trained. They're ready. We're all ready to go storm the lunch.
Stomach's
so
grumbling.
thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you
you guys.
Thank you.